75 Receipts for Pastry Cakes and Sweetmeats. By Miss Leslie. Preface. The following receipts for pastry, cakes, and sweetmeats are original, and have been used by the author and many of her friends with uniform success. They are drawn up in a style so plain and minute, as to be perfectly intelligible to servants, and persons of the most moderate capacity. All the ingredients, with their proper quantities, are enumerated in a list at the head of each receipt, a plan which will greatly facilitate the business of procuring and preparing the requisite articles. There is frequently much difficulty in following directions in English and French cookery books, not only from their want of explicitness, but from the difference in the fuel, fireplaces, and cooking utensils, generally used in Europe and America. And many of the European receipts are so complicated and laborious, that our female cooks are afraid to undertake the arduous task of making anything from them. The receipts in this little book are, in every sense of the word, American. But the writer flatters herself that, if exactly followed, the articles produced from them will not be found inferior to any of a similar description made in the European manner. Experience has proved, that pastry, cakes, and prepared precisely according to these directions will not fail to be excellent, but where economy is expedient, a portion of the seasoning, that is, the spice, wine, brandy, rosewater, essence of lemon, and may be omitted without any essential deviation of flavor, or difference of appearance, retaining, however, the given proportions of eggs, butter, sugar, and flour. But if done at home, and by a person that can be trusted, it will be proved, on trial, that any of these articles may be made in the best and most liberal manner at 1/2 of the cost of the same articles supplied by a confectioner. And they will be found particularly useful to families that live in the country or in small towns, where nothing of the kind is to be purchased. How do you find this book? Any thoughts about the book or the author? Any suggestion for improvement? Please take a moment to share your thoughts in a comment. If you like it, share it with your friends who might enjoy it as well. Subscribe to keep in touch. Visit CompleteAudiobooks.com for more quality content. Weight and measure. As all families are not provided with scales and weights, referring to the ingredients generally used in cakes and pastry, we subjoin a list of weights and measures. Wheat flour 1 pound is 1 quart. Indian meal 1 pound, 2 ounces, is 1 quart. Butter, when soft 1 pound is 1 quart. Loaf sugar, broken 1 pound is 1 quart. White sugar, powdered 1 pound, 1 ounce, is 1 quart. Eggs 10 eggs are 1 pound. Liquid measure. 16 large tablespoonfuls are 1/2 a pint. 8 large tablespoonfuls are 1 gill. 4 large tablespoonfuls are 1/2 a gill. A common-sized tumbler holds 1/2 a pint. A common-sized wineglass 1/2 a gill. Allowing for accidental differences in the quality, freshness, dryness, and moisture of the articles, we believe this comparison between weight and measure to be nearly correct as possible. Part the first, Pastry. Pastry. The eggs should not be beaten till after all the other ingredients are ready, as they will fail very soon. If the whites and yolks are to be beaten separately, do the whites first, as they will stand longer. Eggs should be beaten in a broad shallow pan, spreading wide at the top. Butter and sugar should be stirred in a deep pan with straight sides. Break every egg by itself, in a saucer, before you put it into the pan, that in case there should be any bad ones, they may not spoil the others. Eggs are beaten most expeditiously with rods. A small quantity of white of egg may be beaten with a knife, or a 3-pronged fork. There can be no positive rules as to the exact time of baking each article. Skill in baking is the result of practice, attention, and experience. Much, of course, depends on the state of the fire, and on the size of the things to be baked, and something on the thickness of the pans or dishes. If you bake in a stove, put some bricks in the oven part to set the pans or plates on, and to temper the heat at the bottom. Large sheets of iron, without sides, will be found very useful for small cakes, and to put under the pans or plates. Puff paste. 1/2 pound and 2 ounces of sifted flour. 1/2 pound of the best fresh butter, washed. A little cold water. This will make puff paste for 2 puddings, or for 1 soup plate pie, or for 4 small shells. Weigh 1/2 pound and 2 ounces of flour, and sift it through a hair sieve into a large deep dish. Take out about 1/4 of the flour, and lay it aside on one corner of your pasteboard, to roll and sprinkle with. Wash, in cold water, 1/2 pound of the best fresh butter. Squeeze it hard with your hands and make it up into a round lump. Divide it in 4 equal parts, lay them on one side of your pasteboard, and have ready a glass of cold water. Cut one of the 4 pieces of butter into the pan of flour. Cut it as small as possible. Wet it gradually with a very little water, too much water will make it tough, and mix it well with the point of a large case knife. Do not touch it with your hands. When the dough gets into a lump, sprinkle on the middle of the board some of the flour that you laid aside, and lay the dough upon it, turning it out of the pan with the knife. Rub the rolling pin with flour, and sprinkle a little on the lump of paste. Roll it out thin, quickly, and evenly, pressing on the rolling pin very lightly. Then take the second of the 4 pieces of butter, and, with the point of your knife, stick it in little bits at equal distances all over the sheet of paste. Sprinkle on some flour, and fold up the dough. Flour the pasteboard and rolling pin again. Throw a little flour on the paste and roll it out a second time. Stick the third piece of butter all over it in little bits. Throw on some flour, fold up the paste, sprinkle a little more flour on the dough, and on the rolling pin, and roll it out a third time, always pressing on it lightly. Stick it over with the 4th and last piece of butter. Throw on a little more flour, fold up the paste and then roll it out in a large round sheet. Cut off the sides, so as to make the sheet of a square form, and lay the slips of dough upon the square sheet. Fold it up with the small pieces of trimmings, in the inside. Score or notch it a little with the knife, lay it on a plate and set it away in a cool place, but not where it can freeze, as that will make it heavy. Having made the paste, prepare and mix your pudding or pie. When the mixture is finished, bring out your paste, flour the board and rolling pin, and roll it out with a short quick stroke, and pressing the rolling pin rather harder than while you were putting the butter in. If the paste rises in blisters, it will be light, unless spoiled in baking. Then cut the sheet in half, fold up each piece and roll them out once more, separately, in round sheets the size of your plate. Press on rather harder, but not too hard. Roll the sheets thinnest in the middle and thickest at the edges. If intended for puddings, lay them in buttered soup plates, and trim them evenly round the edges. If the edges do not appear thick enough, you may take the trimmings, put them all together, roll them out, and having cut them in slips the breadth of the rim of the plate, lay them all round to make the paste thicker at the edges. Joining them nicely and evenly, as every patch or crack will appear distinctly when baked. Notch the rim handsomely with a very sharp knife. Fill the dish with the mixture of the pudding, and bake it in a moderate oven. The paste should be of a light brown color. If the oven is too slow, it will be soft and clammy. If too quick, it will not have time to rise as high as it ought to do. In making the best puff paste, try to avoid using more flour to sprinkle and roll with, than the small portion which you have laid aside for that purpose at the beginning. If you make the dough too soft at first, by using too much water, it will be sticky, and require more flour, and will eventually be tough when baked. Do not put your hands to it, as their warmth will injure it. Use the knife instead. Always roll from you rather than to you, and press lightly on the rolling pin, except at the last. It is difficult to make puff paste in the summer, unless in a cellar, or very cool room, and on a marble table. The butter should, if possible, be washed the night before, and kept covered with ice till you use it next day. The water should have ice in it, and the butter should be iced as it sets on the pasteboard. After the paste is mixed, it should be put in a covered dish, and set in cold water till you are ready to give it the last rolling. With all these precautions to prevent its being heavy, it will not rise as well, or be in any respect as good as in cold weather. The handsomest way of ornamenting the edge of a pie or pudding is to cut the rim in large square notches, and then fold over triangularly one corner of every notch. Common paste for pies. 1.5 pounds of sifted flour. 3/4 pound of butter, washed. This will make 1 large pie or 2 small ones. Sift the flour into a pan. Cut the butter into 2 equal parts. Cut 1/2 of the butter into the flour, and cut it up as small as possible. Mix it well with the flour, wetting it gradually with a little cold water. Spread some flour on your pasteboard, take the lump of paste out of the pan, flour your rolling pin, and roll out the paste into a large sheet. Then stick it over with the remaining half of the butter in small pieces, and laid at equal distances. Throw on a little flour, fold up the sheet of paste, flour it slightly, and roll it out again. Then fold it up, and cut it in half or in 4, according to the size of your pies. Roll it out into round sheets the size of your pie plates, pressing rather harder on the rolling pin. Butter your pie plates, lay on your under crust, and trim the edge. Fill the dish with the ingredients of which the pie is composed, and lay on the lid, in which you must prick some holes, or cut a small slit in the top. Crimp the edges with a sharp knife. Heap up the ingredients so that the pie will be highest in the middle. Some think it makes common paste more crisp and light, to beat it hard on both sides with the rolling pin, after you give it the first rolling, when all the butter is in. If the butter is very fresh, you may mix with the flour a saltspoonful of salt. Mince pies. 1.5 pounds of boiled beef's heart, or fresh tongue, chopped when cold. 2 pounds of beef suet, chopped fine. 4 pounds of pippin apples, chopped. 2 pounds of raisins, stoned and chopped. 2 pounds of currants, picked, washed, and dried. 2 pounds of powdered sugar. 1 quart of white wine. 1 quart of brandy. 1 wineglass of rosewater. 2 grated nutmegs. Half an ounce of powdered cinnamon. 1/4 ounce of powdered cloves. 1/4 ounce of powdered mace. A teaspoon of salt. 2 large oranges. Half a pound of citron, cut in slips. Parboil a beef's heart, or a fresh tongue. After you have taken off the skin and fat, weigh 1.5 pounds. When it is cold, chop it very fine. Take the inside of the suet, weigh 2 pounds, and chop it as fine as possible. Mix the meat and suet together, adding the salt. Pare, core, and chop the apples, and then stone and chop the raisins. Having prepared the currants, add them to the other fruit, and mix the fruit with the meat and suet. Put in the sugar and spice, and the grated peel and juice of the oranges. Wet the whole with the rose water and liquor, and mix all well together. Make the paste, allowing for each pie, 1/2 pound of butter and 3/4 pound of sifted flour. Make it in the same manner as puff paste, but it will not be quite so rich. Lay a sheet of paste all over a soup plate. Fill it with mincemeat, laying slips of citron on the top. Roll out a sheet of paste, for the lid of the pie. Put it on, and crimp the edges with a knife. Prick holes in the lid. Bake the pies half an hour in a brisk oven. Keep your mince meat in a jar tightly covered. Set it in a dry, cool place, and occasionally add more brandy to it. Instead of the heart or tongue, you may, if you choose, use part of a round of fresh beef. Plum pudding. 1 pound of raisins, stoned and cut in half. 1 pound of currants, picked, washed and dried. 1 pound of beef suet chopped fine. 1 pound of grated stale bread, or 1/2 pound of flour and 1/2 pound of bread. 8 eggs. 1/4 pound of sugar. A glass of brandy. A pint of milk. A glass of wine. 2 nutmegs, grated. A tablespoonful of mixed cinnamon and mace. A saltspoonful of salt. You must prepare all your ingredients the day before, except beating the eggs, that in the morning you may have nothing to do but to mix them, as the pudding will require 6 hours to boil. Beat the eggs very light, then put to them half the milk and beat both together. Stir in gradually the flour and grated bread. Next add the sugar by degrees. Then the suet and fruit alternately. The fruit must be well sprinkled with flour, lest it sink to the bottom. Stir very hard. Then add the spice and liquor, and lastly the remainder of the milk. Stir the whole mixture very well together. If it is not thick enough, add a little more grated bread or flour. If there is too much bread or flour, the pudding will be hard and heavy. Dip your pudding cloth in boiling water, shake it out and sprinkle it slightly with flour. Lay it in a pan and pour the mixture into the cloth. Tie it up carefully, allowing room for the pudding to swell. Boil it 6 hours, and turn it carefully out of the cloth. Before you send it to table, have ready some blanched sweet almonds cut in slips, or some slips of citron, or both. Stick them all over the outside of the pudding. Eat it with wine, or with a sauce made of drawn butter, wine and nutmeg. The pudding will be improved if you add to the other ingredients, the grated rind of a large lemon or orange. Lemon pudding. 1 small lemon with a smooth thin rind. 3 eggs. 1/4 pound of powdered white sugar. 1/4 pound of fresh butter, washed. A tablespoonful of white wine and brandy, mixed. A teaspoonful of rose water. 5 ounces of sifted flour, and 1/4 pound of fresh butter for the paste. Grate the yellow part of the rind of a small lemon. Then cut the lemon in half, and squeeze the juice into the plate that contains the grated rind, carefully taking out all the seeds. Mix the juice and rind together. Put 1/4 pound of powdered white sugar into a deep earthen pan, and cut up in it 1/4 pound of the best fresh butter. If the weather is very cold, set the pan near the fire, for a few minutes, to soften the butter, but do not allow it to melt or it will be heavy. Stir the butter and sugar together, with a stick or wooden spoon, till it is perfectly light and of the consistence of cream. Put the eggs in a shallow broad pan, and beat them with an egg beater or rods, till they are quite smooth, and as thick as a boiled custard. Then stir the eggs, gradually, into the pan of butter and sugar. Add the liquor and rose water by degrees, and then stir in, gradually, the juice and grated rind of the lemon. Stir the whole very hard, after all the ingredients are in. Have ready a puff paste made of 5 ounces of sifted flour, and 1/4 pound of fresh butter. The paste must be made with as little water as possible. Roll it out in a circular sheet, thin in the center, and thicker towards the edges, and just large enough to cover the bottom, sides, and edges of a soup plate. Butter the soup plate very well, and lay the paste in it, making it neat and even round the broad edge of the plate. With a sharp knife, trim off the superfluous dough, and notch the edges. Put in the mixture with a spoon, and bake the pudding about half an hour, in a moderate oven. It should be baked of a very light brown. If the oven is too hot, the paste will not have time to rise well. If too cold, it will be clammy. When the pudding is cool, grate loaf sugar over it. Before using lemons for any purpose, always roll them a while with your hand on a table. This will cause them to yield a larger quantity of juice. Orange pudding. 1 large orange, of a deep color, and smooth thin rind. 1 lime. 1/4 pound of powdered white sugar. 1/4 pound of fresh butter. 3 eggs. A tablespoonful of mixed wine and brandy. A teaspoonful of rose water. Grate the yellow rind of the orange and lime, and squeeze the juice into a saucer or soup plate, taking out all the seeds. Stir the butter and sugar to a cream. Beat the eggs as light as possible, and then stir them by degrees into the pan of butter and sugar. Add, gradually, the liquor and rose water, and then, by degrees, the orange and lime. Stir all well together. Have ready a sheet of puff paste made of 5 ounces of sifted flour, and 1/4 pound of fresh butter. Lay the paste in a buttered soup plate. Trim and notch the edges, and then put in the mixture. Bake it about half an hour, in a moderate oven. Grate loaf sugar over it, before you send it to table. Coconut pudding. 1/4 pound of coconut, grated. 1/4 pound of powdered white sugar. 3 ounces and a half of fresh butter. The whites only of 6 eggs. A tablespoonful of wine and brandy mixed. Half a teaspoonful of rosewater. Break up a coconut, and take the thin brown skin carefully off, with a knife. Wash all the pieces in cold water, and then wipe them dry, with a clean towel. Weigh 1/4 pound of coconut, and grate it very fine, into a soup plate. Stir the butter and sugar to a cream, and add the liquor and rosewater gradually to them. Beat the whites only, of 6 eggs, till they stand alone on the rods. And then stir the beaten white of egg, gradually, into the butter and sugar. Afterwards, sprinkle in, by degrees, the grated coconut, stirring hard all the time. Then stir all very well at the last. Have ready a puff paste, sufficient to cover the bottom, sides, and edges of a soup plate. Put in the mixture, and bake it in a moderate oven, about half an hour. Grate loaf sugar over it, when cool. Almond pudding. 1/2 pound of sweet almonds, which will be reduced to 1/4 pound, when shelled and blanched. 1 ounce of blanched bitter almonds or peach kernels. The whites only, of 6 eggs. 1/4 pound of butter. 1/4 pound of powdered white sugar. A tablespoonful of mixed brandy, wine, and rosewater. Shell 1/2 pound of sweet almonds, and pour scalding water over them, which will make the skins peel off. As they get cool, pour more boiling water, till the almonds are all blanched. Blanch also the bitter almonds. As you blanch the almonds, throw them into a bowl of cold water. Then take them out, one by one, wipe them dry in a clean towel, and lay them on a plate. Pound them one at a time to a fine paste, in a marble mortar, adding, as you pound them, a few drops of rosewater to prevent their oiling. Pound the bitter and sweet almonds alternately, that they may be well mixed. They must be made perfectly fine and smooth, and are the better for being prepared the day before they are wanted for the pudding. Stir the butter and sugar to a cream, and add to it, gradually, the liquor. Beat the whites of 6 eggs till they stand alone. Stir the almonds and white of eggs, alternately, into the butter and sugar, and then stir the whole well together. Have ready a puff paste sufficient for a soup plate. Butter the plate, lay on the paste, trim and notch it. Then put in the mixture. Bake it about half an hour in a moderate oven. Grate loaf sugar over it. A cheesecake. 4 eggs. A gill of milk. 1/4 pound of butter. 1/4 pound of powdered sugar. 2 ounces of grated bread. A tablespoonful of mixed brandy and wine. A teaspoonful of rosewater. A teaspoonful of mace, cinnamon, and nutmeg, mixed. 1/4 pound of currants. Pick the currants very clean. Wash them through a colander, wipe them in a towel, and then dry them on a dish before the fire. When dry, take out a few to scatter over the top of the cheesecake, lay them aside, and sprinkle the remainder of the currants with the flour. Stir the butter and sugar to a cream. Grate the bread, and prepare the spice. Beat the eggs very light. Boil the milk. When it comes to a boil, add to it half the beaten egg, and boil both together till it becomes a curd, stirring it frequently with a knife. Then throw the grated bread on the curd, and stir all together. Then take the milk, egg, and bread off the fire and stir it, gradually, into the butter and sugar. Next, stir in the remaining half of the egg. Add, by degrees, the liquor and spice. Lastly, stir in, gradually, the currants. Have ready a puff paste, which should be made before you prepare the cheesecake, as the mixture will become heavy by standing. Before you put it into the oven, scatter the remainder of the currants over the top. Bake it half an hour in rather a quick oven. Do not sugar the top. You may bake it either in a soup plate, or in 2 small tin patty pans, which, for cheesecakes, should be of a square shape. If baked in square patty pans, leave at each side a flap of paste in the shape of a half circle. Cut long slits in these flaps and turn them over, so that they will rest on the top of the mixture. You can, if you choose, add to the currants a few raisins stoned, and cut in half. Sweet potato pudding. 1/4 pound of boiled sweet potato. 3 eggs. 1/4 pound of powdered white sugar. 1/4 pound of fresh butter. A glass of mixed wine and brandy. A half glass of rose water. A teaspoonful of mixed spice, nutmeg, mace and cinnamon. Pound the spice, allowing a smaller proportion of mace than of nutmeg and cinnamon. Boil and peel some sweet potatoes, and when they are cold, weigh 1/4 pound. Mash the sweet potato very smooth, and rub it through a sieve. Stir the sugar and butter to a cream. Beat the eggs very light and stir them into the butter and sugar, alternately with the sweet potato. Add by degrees the liquor, rose water and spice. Stir all very hard together. Spread puff paste on a soup plate. Put in the mixture, and bake it about half an hour in a moderate oven. Grate sugar over it. Pumpkin pudding. 1/2 pound of stewed pumpkin. 3 eggs. 1/4 pound of fresh butter, or a pint of cream. 1/4 pound of powdered white sugar. 1/2 glass of wine and brandy mixed. 1/2 glass of rose water. A teaspoonful of mixed spice, nutmeg, mace and cinnamon. Stew some pumpkin with as little water as possible. Drain it in a colander, and press it till dry. When cold, weigh 1/2 pound, and pass it through a sieve. Prepare the spice. Stir together the sugar, and butter, to cream, till they are perfectly light. Add to them, gradually, the spice and liquor. Beat 3 eggs very light, and stir them into the butter and sugar alternately with the pumpkin. Cover a soup plate with puff paste, and put in the mixture. Bake it in a moderate oven about half an hour. Grate sugar over it when cool. Instead of the butter, you may boil a pint of milk or cream, and when cold, stir into it in turn the sugar, eggs, and pumpkin. Gooseberry pudding. A pint of stewed gooseberries, with all their juice. 1/4 pound of powdered sugar. 2 ounces of fresh butter. 2 ounces of grated bread. 3 eggs. Stew the gooseberries till quite soft. When they are cold, mash them fine with the back of a spoon, and stir into them 2 ounces of sugar. Take 2 ounces more of sugar, and stir it to a cream with 2 ounces of butter. Grate very fine as much stale bread as will weigh 2 ounces. Beat 3 eggs, and stir them into the butter and sugar, in turn with the gooseberries and bread. Lay puff paste in a soup plate. Put in the mixture, and bake it half an hour. Do not grate sugar over it. Baked apple pudding. A pint of stewed apples. 1/2 pint of cream, or 2 ounces of butter. 1/4 pound of powdered sugar. A nutmeg grated. A tablespoonful of rose water. A teaspoonful of grated lemon peel. Stew your apple in as little water as possible, and not long enough for the pieces to break and lose their shape. Put them in a colander to drain, and mash them with the back of a spoon. If stewed too long, and in too much water, they will lose their flavor. When cold, mix with them the nutmeg, rose water, and lemon peel, and 2 ounces of sugar. Stir the other 2 ounces of sugar, with the butter or cream, and then mix it gradually with the apple. Bake it in puff paste, in a soup dish, about half an hour in a moderate oven. Do not sugar the top. Fruit pies. Fruit pies for family use, are generally made with common paste, allowing 3/4 pound of butter to 1.5 pounds of flour. Peaches and plums for pies, should be cut in half, and the stones taken out. Cherries also should be stoned, and red cherries only should be used for pies. Apples should be cut into very thin slices, and are much improved by a little lemon peel. Sweet apples are not good for pies, as they are very insipid when baked, and seldom get thoroughly done. If green apples are used, they should first be stewed in as little water as possible, and made very sweet. Apples, stewed previous to baking, should not be done till they break, but only till they are tender. They should then be drained in a colander, and chopped fine with a knife or the edge of a spoon. In making pies of juicy fruit, it is a good way to set a small teacup on the bottom crust, and lay the fruit all round it. The juice will collect under the cup, and not run out at the edges or top of the pie. The fruit should be mixed with a sufficient quantity of sugar, and piled up in the middle, so as to make the pie highest in the center. The upper crust should be pricked with a fork, or have a slit cut in the middle. The edges should be nicely crimped with a knife. Dried peaches, dried apples, and cranberries should be stewed with a very little water, and allowed to get quite cold before they are put into the pie. If stewed fruit is put in warm, it will make the paste heavy. If your pies are made in the form of shells, or without lids, the fruit should always be stewed first, or it will not be sufficiently done, as the shells, which should be of puff paste, must not bake so long as covered pies. Shells intended for sweetmeats must be baked empty, and the fruit put into them before they go to table. Fruit pies with lids should have loaf sugar grated over them. If they have been baked the day before, they should be warmed in the stove, or near the fire, before they are sent to table, to soften the crust, and make them taste fresh. Raspberry and apple pies are much improved by taking off the lid, and pouring in a little cream just before they go to table. Replace the lid very carefully. Oyster pie. 100 large fresh oysters, or more if small. The yolks of 6 eggs boiled hard. A large slice of stale bread, grated. A teaspoonful of salt. A tablespoonful of pepper. A tablespoonful of mixed spice, nutmeg, mace and cinnamon. Take a large round dish, butter it and spread a rich paste over the sides, and round the edge, but not at the bottom. Salt oysters will not do for pies. They should be fresh, and as large and fine as possible. Drain off part of the liquor from the oysters. Put them into a pan, and season them with pepper, salt and spice. Stir them well with the seasoning. Have ready the yolks of eggs, chopped fine, and the grated bread. Pour the oysters, with as much of their liquor as you please, into the dish that has the paste in it. Strew over them the chopped egg and grated bread. Roll out the lid of the pie, and put it on, crimping the edges handsomely. Take a small sheet of paste, cut it into a square and roll it up. Cut it with a sharp knife into the form of a double tulip. Make a slit in the center of the upper crust, and stick the tulip in it. Cut out 8 large leaves of paste, and lay them on the lid. Bake the pie in a quick oven. If you think the oysters will be too much done by baking them in the crust, you can substitute for them pieces of bread, to keep up the lid of the pie. Put the oysters with their liquor and the seasoning, chopped egg, grated bread, and into a pan. Cover them closely, and let them just come to a boil, taking them off the fire, and stirring them frequently. When the crust is baked, take the lid neatly off, loosening it round the edge with a knife, take out the pieces of bread, and put in the oysters. Lay the lid on again very carefully. For oyster patties, the oysters are prepared in the same manner. They may be chopped if you choose. They must be put in small shells of puff paste. Beefsteak pie. Butter a deep dish, and spread a sheet of paste all over the bottom, sides, and edge. Cut away from your beefsteak all the bone, fat, gristle, and skin. Cut the lean in small thin pieces, about as large, generally, as the palm of your hand. Beat the meat well with the rolling pin, to make it juicy and tender. If you put in the fat, it will make the gravy too greasy and strong, as it cannot be skimmed. Put a layer of meat over the bottom crust of your dish, and season it to your taste, with pepper, salt, and, if you choose, a little nutmeg. A small quantity of mushroom ketchup is an improvement, so, also, is a little minced onion. Have ready some cold boiled potatoes sliced thin. Spread over the meat, a layer of potatoes, and a small piece of butter. Then another layer of meat, seasoned, and then a layer of potatoes, and so on till the dish is full and heaped up in the middle, having a layer of meat on the top. Pour in a little water. Cover the pie with a sheet of paste, and trim the edges. Notch it handsomely with a knife, and, if you choose, make a tulip of paste, and stick it in the middle of the lid, and lay leaves of paste round it. Fresh oysters will greatly improve a beefsteak pie. So also will mushrooms. Any meat pie may be made in a similar manner. Indian pudding. A pound of beef suet, chopped very fine. A pint of molasses. A pint of rich milk. 4 eggs. A large teaspoonful of powdered nutmeg and cinnamon. A little grated or chipped lemon peel. Indian meal sufficient to make a thick batter. Warm the milk and molasses, and stir them together. Beat the eggs, and stir them gradually into the milk and molasses, in turn with the suet and Indian meal. Add the spice and lemon peel and stir all very hard together. Take care not to put too much Indian meal, or the pudding will be heavy and solid. Dip the cloth in boiling water. Shake it out, and flour it slightly. Pour the mixture into it, and tie it up, leaving room for the pudding to swell. Boil it 3 hours. Serve it up hot, and eat it with sauce made of drawn butter, wine and nutmeg. When cold, it is good cut in slices and fried. Batter pudding. 6 eggs. 8 tablespoonfuls of sifted flour. 1 quart of milk. A saltspoonful of salt. Stir the flour, gradually, into the milk, carefully dissolving all the lumps. Beat the eggs very light, and add them by degrees to the milk and flour. Put in the salt, and stir the whole well together. Take a very thick pudding cloth. Dip it in boiling water, and flour it. Pour into it the mixture and tie it up, leaving room for it to swell. Boil it hard, 1 hour, and keep it in the pot, till it is time to send it to table. Serve it up with wine sauce. A square cloth, which when tied up will make the pudding of a round form, is better than a bag. Apple batter pudding is made by pouring the batter over a dish of pippins, pared, cored, and sweetened, either whole or cut in pieces. Bake it, and eat it with butter and sugar. Bread pudding. 1/4 pound of grated stale bread. 1 quart of milk, boiled with 2 or 3 sticks of cinnamon. Slightly broken. 8 eggs. 1/4 pound of sugar. A little grated lemon peel. Boil the milk with the cinnamon, strain it, and set it away till quite cold. Grate as much crumb of stale bread as will weigh 1/4 pound. Beat the eggs, and when the milk is cold, stir them into it in turn with the bread and sugar. Add the lemon peel, and if you choose, a tablespoonful of rosewater. Bake it in a buttered dish, and grate nutmeg over it when done. Do not send it to table hot. Baked puddings should never be eaten till they have become cold, or at least cool. Rice pudding. 1/4 pound of rice. 1/4 pound of butter. 1/4 pound of sugar. 1.5 pints of milk, or cream and milk. 6 eggs. A teaspoonful of mixed spice, mace, nutmeg and cinnamon. 1/2 wineglass of rosewater. Wash the rice. Boil it till very soft. Drain it and set it away to get cold. Put the butter and sugar together in a pan, and stir them till very light. Add to them the spice and rosewater. Beat the eggs very light, and stir them, gradually, into the milk. Then stir the eggs and the milk into the butter and sugar, alternately with the rice. Bake it and grate nutmeg over the top. Currants or raisins, floured, and stirred in at the last, will greatly improve it. It should be eaten cold, or quite cool. Boston pudding. Make a good common paste with 1.5 pounds of flour, and 3/4 pound of butter. Footnote, or 3/4 pound of beef suet, chopped very fine. Mix the suet at once with the flour, knead it with cold water into a stiff dough, and then roll it out into a large thin sheet. Fold it up and roll it again. When you roll it out the last time, cut off the edges, till you get the sheet of paste of an even square shape. Have ready some fruit sweetened to your taste. If cranberries, gooseberries, dried peaches, or damsons, they should be stewed, and made very sweet. If apples, they should be stewed in a very little water, drained, and seasoned with nutmeg, rosewater and lemon. If currants, raspberries, or blackberries, they should be mashed with sugar, and put into the pudding raw. Spread the fruit very thick, all over the sheet of paste, which must not be rolled out too thin. When it is covered all over with the fruit, roll it up, and close the dough at both ends, and down the last side. Tie the pudding in a cloth and boil it. Eat it with sugar. It must not be taken out of the pot till just before it is brought to table. Fritters. 7 eggs. Half a pint of milk. A saltspoonful of salt. Sufficient flour to make a thick batter. Beat the eggs well and stir them gradually into the milk. Add the salt and stir in flour enough to make a thick batter. Fry them in lard, and serve them up hot. Eat them with wine and sugar. They are improved by stirring in a tablespoonful of yeast. These are excellent with the addition of cold stewed apple, stirred into the mixtures, in which case use less flour. Fine custards. A quart of milk or cream. The yolk only, of 16 eggs. 6 ounces of powdered white sugar. A large handful of peach leaves or half an ounce of peach kernels. Or bitter almonds, broken in pieces. A tablespoonful of rosewater. A nutmeg. Boil in the milk the cinnamon, and the peach leaves, or peach kernels. When it has boiled, set it away to get cold. As soon as it is cold, strain it through a sieve, to clear it from the cinnamon, peach leaves, and stir into it gradually, the sugar, spice, and rosewater. Beat the yolks of 16 eggs very light, and stir them by degrees into the milk, which must be quite cold or the eggs will make it curdle. Put the custards into cups, and set them in a baking pan, half filled with water. When baked, grate some nutmeg over each and ice them. Make the icing of the whites of 8 eggs, a large teaspoonful of powdered loaf sugar, and 6 drops of essence of lemon, beaten all together till it stands alone. Pile up some of the icing on the top of each custard, heaping it high. Put a spot of red nonpareils on the middle of the pile of icing. If the weather be damp, or the eggs not new laid, more than 8 whites will be required for the icing. Plain custards. A quart of rich milk. 8 eggs. A quarter of a pound of powdered sugar. A handful of peach leaves, or half an ounce of peach kernels. Broken in pieces. A nutmeg. Boil the peach leaves or kernels in the milk, and set it away to cool. When cold, strain out the leaves or kernels, and stir in the sugar. Beat the eggs very light, and stir them gradually into the milk when it is quite cold. Bake it in cups, or in a large white dish. When cool, grate nutmeg over the top. Rice custards. Half a pound of rice. Half a pound of raisins or currants. 8 yolks of eggs or 6 whole eggs. 6 ounces of powdered sugar. A quart of rich milk. A handful of peach leaves, or half an ounce of peach kernels. Broken in pieces. Half an ounce of cinnamon, broken in pieces. Boil the rice with the raisins or currants, which must first be floured. Butter some cups or a mold, and when the rice is quite soft, drain it, and put it into them. Set it away to get cold. Beat the eggs well. Boil the milk with the cinnamon and peach leaves, or kernels. As soon as it has come to a boil, take it off and strain it through a sieve. Then set it again on the fire, stir into it alternately, the egg and sugar, taking it off frequently and stirring it hard, lest it become a curd. Take care not to boil it too long, or it will be lumpy and lose its flavor. When done, set it away to cool. Turn out the rice from the cups or mold, into a deep dish. Pour some of the boiled custard over it, and send up the remainder of the custard in a sauce boat. You may, if you choose, ornament the lumps of rice, after the custard is poured round them, by making a stiff froth of white of egg, beaten till it stands alone, and a few drops of essence of lemon, with a very little powdered loaf sugar. Heap the froth on the top of each lump of rice. Cold custards. A quart of new milk, and a half a pint of cream, mixed. A quarter of a pound of powdered white sugar. A large glass of white wine, in which an inch of washed rennet has been soaked. A nutmeg. Mix together the milk, cream, and sugar. Stir the wine into it, and pour the mixture into your custard cups. Set them in a warm place near the fire, till they become a firm curd. Then set them on ice, or in a very cold place. Grate nutmeg over them. Curds and whey. Take a small piece of rennet about 2 inches square. Wash it very clean in cold water, to get all the salt off, and wipe it dry. Put it in a teacup, and pour on it just enough of lukewarm water to cover it. Let it set all night, or, for several hours. Then take out the rennet, and stir the water in which it was soaked, into a quart of milk, which should be in a broad dish. Set the milk in a warm place, till it becomes a firm curd. As soon as the curd is completely made, set it in a cool place, or on ice, if in summer, for 2 or 3 hours before you want to use it. Eat it with wine, sugar, and nutmeg. The whey, drained from the curd, is an excellent drink for invalids. A trifle. A quart of cream. A quarter of a pound of loaf sugar, powdered. Half a pint of white wine and half a gill of brandy mixed. 8 macaroons, or more if you choose. For small sponge cakes or Naples biscuit. 2 ounces of blanched sweet almonds, pounded in a mortar. 1 ounce of blanched bitter almonds or peach kernels. The juice and grated peel of 2 lemons. A nutmeg, grated. A glass of noyau. A pint of rich baked custard, made of the yolks of eggs. Pound the sweet and bitter almonds to a smooth paste, adding a little rosewater as you pound them. Grate the yellow peels of the lemons, and squeeze the juice into a saucer. Break the sponge cake and macaroons into small pieces, mix them with the almonds, and lay them in the bottom of a large glass bowl. Grate a nutmeg over them, and the juice and peel of the lemons. Add the wine and brandy, and let the mixture remain untouched, till the cakes are dissolved in the liquor. Then stir it a little. Mix the cream and sugar with a glass of noyau, and beat it with a whisk or rods, till it stands alone. As the froth rises, take it off with a spoon, and lay it on a sieve, with a large dish under it, to drain. The cream, that drains into the dish, must be poured back into the pan with the rest, and beaten over again. When the cream is finished, set it in a cool place. When the custard is cold, pour it into the glass bowl upon the dissolved cakes, and when the cream is ready, fill up the bowl with it, heaping it high in the middle. You may ornament it with nonpareils. If you choose, you can put in, between the custard and the frothed cream, a layer of fruit jelly or small fruit preserved. Whipped cream. A quart of cream. The whites of 4 eggs. Half a pint of white wine. A quarter of a pound of powdered loaf sugar. Tea drops of strong essence of lemon, or 2 lemons cut in thin slices, or the juice of a large lemon. Mix together, in a broad pan, all the ingredients, unless you use slices of lemon, and then they must be laid at intervals among the froth, as you heap it in the bowl. With a whisk or rods, beat the cream to a strong froth. Have beside your pan a sieve, bottom upwards, with a large dish under it. As the froth rises, take it lightly off with a spoon, and lay it on the sieve to drain. When the top of the sieve is full, transfer the froth to a large glass or china bowl. Continue to do this till the bowl is full. The cream which has dropped through the sieve into the dish, must be poured into the pan, and beaten over again. When all the cream is converted into froth, pile it up in the bowl, making it highest in the middle. If you choose, you may ornament it with red and green nonpareils. If you put it in glasses, lay a little jelly in the bottom of each glass, and pile the cream on it. Keep it in a cool place till you want to use it. Floating island. 6 whites of eggs. 6 large tablespoonfuls of jelly. A pint of cream. Put the jelly and white of egg into a pan, and beat it together with a whisk, till it becomes a stiff froth and stands alone. Have ready the cream, in a broad shallow dish. Just before you send it to table, pile up the froth in the center of the cream. Ice cream. A quart of rich cream. Half a pound of powdered loaf sugar. The juice of 2 large lemons, or a pint of strawberries or raspberries. Put the cream into a broad pan. Then stir in the sugar by degrees, and when all is well mixed, strain it through a sieve. Put it into a tin that has a close cover, and set it in a tub. Fill the tub with ice broken into very small pieces, and strew among the ice a large quantity of salt, taking care that none of the salt gets into the cream. Scrape the cream down with a spoon as it freezes round the edges of the tin. While the cream is freezing, stir in gradually the lemon juice, or the juice of a pint of mashed strawberries or raspberries. When it is all frozen, dip the tin in lukewarm water, take out the cream, and fill your glasses. But not till a few minutes before you want to use it, as it will very soon melt. You may heighten the color of the red fruit, by a little cochineal. If you wish to have it in molds, put the cream into them as soon as it has frozen in the tin. Set the molds in a tub of ice and salt. Just before you want to use the cream, take the molds out of the tub, wipe or wash the salt carefully from the outside, dip the molds in lukewarm water, and turn out the cream. You may flavor a quart of ice cream with 2 ounces of sweet almonds and 1 ounce of bitter almonds, blanched and beaten in a mortar with a little rosewater to a smooth paste. Stir in the almonds gradually while the cream is freezing. Another kind of ice cream. A pint and a half of rich cream. A quart and a half pint of morning's milk. 1 pound of loaf sugar. 2 eggs. 1 tablespoonful of flour. 2 lemons. Or half a vanilla bean, split into small pieces. Or 2 ounces of sweet almonds and 1 ounce of bitter almonds. Blanched and split into pieces. Take half of the milk and put in the ingredient that is to flavor it, either the vanilla, the almonds, or the grated rind of the lemons. Boil it, stirring in gradually the sugar. Having beaten the eggs well, add to them 2 tablespoonfuls of cold milk, and pour them into the boiling milk. Let them simmer 2 or 3 minutes, stirring them all the time. Then take the mixture off the fire and strain it through book muslin into a pan. Add the cream and the remainder of the milk, and put the whole into the tin freezer, which must be set in a tub filled with ice, among which must be scattered a great deal of salt. Squeeze the juice from the 2 lemons and stir it into the cream, by degrees, while it is freezing. When it is all frozen, turn it out, first dipping the tin for a moment in warm water. If you wish to flavor it with strawberry or raspberry juice, that, like the lemon juice, must be stirred gradually in while the cream is freezing. In places where cream is not abundant, this receipt, though inferior in richness, will be found more economical than the preceding one. It is, however, less easy and expeditious. Calf's feet jelly. 8 calves' feet. 3 quarts of water. A pint of white wine. 3 lemons. The whites of 6 eggs. Half an ounce of cinnamon. Half a pound of loaf sugar, broken into lumps. Endeavor to procure calf's feet that have been nicely singed, but not skinned, as the skin being left on, makes the jelly much firmer. The day before you want to use the jelly, boil the 8 calf's feet in 3 quarts of water, till the meat drops from the bone. When sufficiently done, put it into a colander or sieve, and let the liquid drain from the meat, into a broad pan or dish. Skim off the fat. Let the jelly stand till next day, and then carefully scrape off the sediment from the bottom. It will be a firm jelly, if too much water has not been used, and if it has bolted long enough. If it is not firm at first, it will not become so afterwards when boiled with the other ingredients. There should on no account be more than 3 quarts of water. Early next morning, put the jelly into a tin kettle, or covered tin pan, set it on the fire, and melt it a little. Take it off, and season it with the cinnamon slightly broken, a pint of Madeira wine, 3 lemons cut in thin slices, and half a pound of loaf sugar, broken up. If you wish it high-colored, add 2 tablespoonfuls of French brandy. Mix all well together. Beat, slightly, the whites of 6 eggs, saving the egg shell, and stir the whites into the jelly. Break up the egg shells into very small pieces, and throw them in also. Stir the whole very well together. Set it on the fire, and boil it hard 5 minutes, but do not stir it, as that will prevent its clearing. Have ready a large white flannel bag, the top wide, and the bottom tapering to a point. Tie the bag to the backs of 2 chairs, or to the legs of a table, and set a wild dish or a mold under it. After the jelly has boiled 5 minutes, pour it hot into the bag, and let it drip through into the dish. Do not squeeze the bag, as that will make the jelly dull and cloudy. If it is not clear the first time it passes through the bag, empty out all the ingredients, wash the bag, suspend it again, put another white dish under it, pour the jelly back into the bag, and let it drip through again. Repeat this 6 or 8 times, or till it is clear, putting a clean dish under it every time. If it does not drip freely, move the bag into a warmer place. When the jelly has all dripped through the bag and is clear, set it in a cool place to congeal. It will sometimes congeal immediately, and sometimes not for several hours, particularly if the weather is warm and damp. If the weather is very cold, you must take care not to let it freeze. When it is quite firm, which perhaps it will not be till evening, fill your glasses with it, piling it up very high. If you make it in a mold, you must either set the mold under the bag while it is dripping, or pour it from the dish into the mold while it is liquid. When it is perfectly congealed, dip the mold for an instant in boiling water to loosen the jelly. Turn it out on a glass dish. This quantity of ingredients will make a quart of jelly when finished. In cool weather it may be made a day or 2 before it is wanted. You may increase the seasoning, that is, the wine, lemon, and cinnamon, according to your taste, but less than the above proportion will not be sufficient to flavor the jelly. Iced jelly is made in the same manner, only not so stiff. For calves' feet will be sufficient. Freeze it as you would ice cream, and serve it up in glasses. Blancmange. For calf's feet. 1.5 pints of thick cream. Half a pound of loaf sugar, broken up. A glass of wine. Half a glass of rose water. A teaspoonful of mace, beaten and sifted. Get 4 calf's feet. If possible some that have been singed, and not skinned. Scrape, and clean them well, and boil them in 3 quarts of water till all the meat drops off the bone. Drain the liquid through a colander or sieve, and skim it well. Let it stand till next morning to congeal. Then clean it well from the sediment, and put it into a tin or bell-metal kettle. Stir into it, the cream, sugar, and mace. Boil it hard for 5 minutes, stirring it several times. Then strain it through a linen cloth or napkin into a large bowl, and add the wine and rose water. Set it in a cool place for 3 or 4 hours, stirring it very frequently with a spoon, to prevent the cream from separating from the jelly. The more it is stirred the better. Stir it till it is cool. Wash your molds, wipe them dry, and then wet them with cold water. When the blancmange becomes very thick, that is, in 3 or 4 hours, if the weather is not too damp, put it into your molds. When it has set in them till it is quite firm, loosen it carefully all round with a knife, and turn it out on glass or china plates. If you wish to make it with almonds, take an ounce of blanched bitter almonds, and 2 ounces of sweet. Beat them in a mortar to a fine paste, pouring in occasionally a little rose water. When the mixture is ready to boil, add the almonds to it gradually, stirring them well in. Or you may stir them in, while it is cooling in the bowl. If it inclines to stick to the molds, set them an instant in hot water. It will then turn out easily. If you choose to make it without calves' feet, you can substitute an ounce of the best and dearest isinglass, or, if in summer, an ounce and a quarter, boiled with the other ingredients. If made with isinglass, you must use 2 ounces of sweet, and an ounce of bitter almonds, with the addition of the grated rind of a large lemon, and a large stick of cinnamon, broken up, a glass of wine, and half a glass of rosewater. Those ingredients must be all mixed together, with a quart of cream, and boiled hard for 5 minutes. The mixture must then be strained through a napkin, into a large bowl. Set it in a cool place, and stir it frequently till nearly cold. It must then be put into the molds. You may substitute for the almonds, half a gill of noyau, in which case, omit the wine. Part the 2nd, Cakes. General directions. In making cakes it is particularly necessary that the eggs should be well beaten. They are not sufficiently light till the surface looks smooth and level, until they get so thick as to be of the consistence of boiled custard. White of egg should always be beaten till it becomes a heap of stiff froth, without any liquid at the bottom, until it hangs from the rods or fork without dropping. Eggs become light soonest when new laid, and when beaten near the fire or in warm dry weather. Butter and sugar should be stirred till it looks like thick cream, until it stands up in the pan. It should be kept cool. If too warm, it will make the cakes heavy. Large cakes should be baked in tin or earthen pans with straight sides, that are as nearly perpendicular as possible. They cut into handsomer slices, and if they are to be iced, it will be found very inconvenient to put on the icing, if the cake slopes in towards the bottom. Before you ice a cake, dredge it all over with flour, and then wipe the flour off. This will enable you to spread on the icing more evenly. Before you cut an ice cake, cut the icing by itself with a small sharp penknife. The large knife with which you divide the cake, will crack and break the icing. Large gingerbread, as it burns very easily, may be baked in an earthen pan. So also may black cake or pound cake. Tin pans or molds, with a hollow tube in the middle, are best for cakes. If large cakes are baked in tin pans, the bottom and sides should be covered with sheets of paper, before the mixture is put in. The paper must be well buttered. Sponge cakes and almond cakes should be baked in pans that are as thin as possible. If the cakes should get burnt, scrape them with a knife or grater, as soon as they are cool. Always be careful to butter your pans well. Should the cakes stick, they cannot be got out without breaking. For queen cakes, the small tins of a round or oval shape are most convenient. Fill them but little more than half. After the mixture is completed, set it in a cool place till all the cakes are baked. In rolling out cakes made of dough, use as little flour as possible. When you lay them in the pans, do not place them too close together, lest they run into each other. When you are cutting them out, dip the cutter frequently in flour, to prevent it slicking. Queen cake. 1 pound of powdered white sugar. 1 pound of fresh butter, washed. 14 ounces of sifted flour. 10 eggs. 1 wineglass of wine and brandy, mixed. Half a glass of rosewater, or 12 drops of essence of lemon. 1 teaspoonful of mace and cinnamon, mixed. 1 nutmeg, beaten or grated. Pound the spice to a fine powder, in a marble mortar, and sift it well. Put the sugar into a deep earthen pan, and cut the butter into it. Stir them together, till very light. Beat the eggs in a broad shallow pan, till they are perfectly smooth and thick. Stir into the butter and sugar a little of the beaten egg, and then a little flour, and so on alternately, a little egg and a little flour, till the whole is in, continuing all the time to beat the eggs, and stirring the mixture very hard. Add by degrees, the spice, and then the liquor, a little at a time. Finally, put in the rosewater, or essence of lemon. Footnote: in buying essence or oil of lemon, endeavor to get that which is white, it being much the strongest and best. When it looks greenish, it is generally very weak, so that when used, a double or treble quantity is necessary. Stir the whole very hard at the last. Take about 2 dozen little tins, or more, if you have room for them in the oven. Rub them very well with fresh butter. With a spoon, put some of the mixture in each tin, but do not fill them to the top as the cakes will rise high in baking. Bake them in a quick oven, about a quarter of an hour. When they are done, they will shrink a little from the sides of the tins. Before you fill your tins again, scrape them well with a knife, and wash or wipe them clean. If the cakes are scorched by too hot a fire, do not scrape off the burnt parts till they have grown cold. Make an icing with the whites of 3 eggs, beaten till it stands alone, and 24 teaspoonfuls of the best loaf sugar, powdered, and beaten gradually into the white of egg. Flavor it with a teaspoonful of rosewater or 8 drops of essence of lemon, stirred in at the last. Spread it evenly with a broad knife, over the top of each queen cake, ornamenting them, while the icing is quite wet, with red and green nonpareils or fine sugar sand, dropped on, carefully, with the thumb and finger. When the cakes are iced, set them in a warm place to dry, but not too near the fire, as that will cause the icing to crack. Footnote: you may color icing of a fine pink, by mixing with it a few drops of liquid cochineal, which is prepared by boiling very slowly in an earthen or china vessel 20 grains of cochineal powder, 20 grains of cream of tartar, and 20 grains of powdered alum, all dissolved in a gill of soft water, and boiled till reduced to 1/2. Strain it and cork it up in a small phial. Pink icing should be ornamented with white nonpareils. Pound cake. 1 pound of flour, sifted. 1 pound of white sugar, powdered and sifted. 1 pound of fresh butter. 10 eggs. Half a glass of wine /. Half a glass of brandy, mixed. Half a glass of rosewater / 12 drops of essence of lemon. A tablespoonful of mixed mace and cinnamon. A nutmeg, powdered. Pound the spice and sift it. There should be twice as much cinnamon as mace. Mix the cinnamon, mace, and nutmeg together. Sift the flour in a broad pan, or wooden bowl. Sift the powdered sugar into a large deep pan, and cut the butter into it, in small pieces. If the weather is very cold, and the butter hard, set the pan near the fire for a few minutes, but if the butter is too warm, the cake will be heavy. Stir the butter and sugar together, with a wooden stick, till they are very light and white and look like cream. Beat the eggs in a broad shallow pan with a wood egg beater or whisk. They must be beaten till they are thick and smooth, and of the consistence of boiled custard. Pour the liquor and rosewater, gradually, into the butter and sugar, stirring all the time. Add, by degrees, the essence of lemon and spice. Stir the egg and flour alternately into the butter and sugar, a handful of flour, and about 2 spoonfuls of the egg, which you must continue to beat all the time, and when all is in, stir the whole mixture very hard, for near 10 minutes. Butter a large tin pan, or a cake mold with an open tube rising from the middle. Put the mixture into it as evenly as possible. Bake it in a moderate oven, for 2, or 3, or 4 hours, in proportion to its thickness, and to the heat of the fire. When you think it is nearly done, thrust a twig or wooden skewer into it, down to the bottom. If the stick come out clean and dry, the cake is almost baked. When quite done, it will shrink from the sides of the pan, and cease making a noise. Then withdraw the coals. If baked in a Dutch oven, take off the lid, and let the cake remain in the oven to cool gradually. You may ice it either warm or cold. Before you put the icing on a large cake, dredge the cake all over with flour, and then wipe the flour off. This will make the icing stick on better. If you have sufficient time, the appearance of the cake will be much improved by icing it twice. Put on the first icing soon after the cake is taken out of the oven, and the second the next day when the first is perfectly dry. While the last icing is wet, ornament it with colored sugar sand or nonpareils. Black cake, or plum cake. 1 pound of flour sifted. 1 pound of fresh butter. 1 pound of powdered white sugar. 12 eggs. 2 pounds of the best raisins. 2 pounds of currants. 2 tablespoonfuls of mixed spice, mace and cinnamon. 2 nutmegs powdered. A large glass of wine A large glass of brandy, mixed together. Half a glass of rosewater A pound of citron. Pick the currants very clean, and wash them, draining them through a colander. Wipe them in a towel. Spread them out on a large dish, and set them near the fire, or in the hot sun, to dry, placing the dish in a slanting position. Having stoned the raisins, cut them in half, and, when all are done, sprinkle them well with sifted flour, to prevent their sinking to the bottom of the cake. When the currants are dry, sprinkle them also with flour. Pound the spice, allowing twice as much cinnamon as mace. Sift it, and mix the mace, nutmeg, cinnamon together. Mix also the liquor and rosewater in a tumbler or cup. Cut the citron in slips. Sift the flour into a broad dish. Sift the sugar into a deep earthen pan, and cut the butter into it. Warm it near the fire, if the weather is too cold for it to mix easily. Stir the butter and sugar to a cream. Beat the eggs as light as possible. Stir them into the butter and sugar, alternately with the flour. Stir very hard. Add gradually the spice and liquor. Stir the raisins and currants alternately into the mixture, taking care that they are well floured. Stir the whole as hard as possible, for 10 minutes after the ingredients are in. Cover the bottom and sides of a large tin or earthen pan, with sheets of white paper well buttered, and put into it some of the mixture. Then spread on it some of the citron, which must not be cut too small. Next put a layer of the mixture, and then a layer of citron, and so on till it is all in, having a layer of the mixture at the top. This cake is always best baked in a baker's oven, and will require 4 or 5 hours, in proportion to its thickness. Footnote: after this cake is done, it will be the better for withdrawing the fire, if baked in an iron oven, and letting it stay in the oven all night, or till it gets quite cold. Ice it the next day. Sponge cake. 12 eggs. 10 ounces of sifted flour, dried near the fire. A pound of loaf sugar, powdered and sifted. 12 drops of essence of lemon. A grated nutmeg. A teaspoonful of powdered cinnamon and mace, mixed. Beat the eggs as light as possible. Eggs for sponge or almond cakes require more beating than for any other purpose. Beat the sugar, by degrees, into the eggs. Beat very hard, and continue to beat some time after the sugar is all in. No sort of sugar but loaf will make light sponge cake. Stir in, gradually, the spice and essence of lemon. Then, by degrees, put in the flour, a little at a time, stirring round the mixture very slowly with a knife. If the flour is stirred in too hard, the cake will be tough. It must be done lightly and gently, so that the top of the mixture will be covered with bubbles. As soon as the flour is all in, begin to bake it, as setting will injure it. Put it in small tins, well buttered, or in one large tin pan. The thinner the pans, the better for sponge cake. Fill the small tins about half full. Grate loaf sugar over the top of each, before you set them in the oven. Sponge cake requires a very quick oven, particularly at the bottom. It should be baked as fast as possible, or it will be tough and heavy, however light it may have been before it went into the oven. It is of all cakes the most liable to be spoiled in baking. When taken out of the tins, the cakes should be spread on a sieve to cool. If baked in one large cake, it should be iced. A large cake of 12 eggs should be baked at least an hour in a quick oven. For small cakes, 10 minutes is generally sufficient. If they get very much out of shape in baking, it is a sign that the oven is too slow. Some think that sponge cakes and almond cakes are lighter, when the yolks and whites of the eggs are beaten in separate pans, and mixed gently together before the sugar is beaten into them. If done separately from the yolks, the whites should be beaten till they stand alone. Almond cake. 2 ounces of blanched bitter almonds, pounded very fine. 7 ounces of flour, sifted and dried. 10 eggs. 1 pound of loaf sugar, powdered and sifted. 2 tablespoonfuls of rosewater. Take 2 ounces of shelled bitter almonds or peach kernels. Scald them in hot water, and as you peel them, throw them into a bowl of cold water, then wipe them dry, and pound them one by one in a mortar, till they are quite fine and smooth. Break 10 eggs, putting the yolks in one pan and the whites in another. Beat them separately as light as possible, the whites first, and then the yolks. Add the sugar, gradually, to the yolks, beating it in very hard. Then, by degrees, beat in the almonds, and then add the rose water. Stir half the whites of the eggs into the yolks and sugar. Divide the flour into 2 equal parts, and stir in 1/2, slowly and lightly, till it bubbles on the top. Then the other half of the white of egg, and then the remainder of the flour very lightly. Butter a large square tin pan, or one made of pasteboard, which will be better. Put in the mixture, and set immediately in a quick oven, which must be rather hotter at the bottom than at the top. Bake it according to the thickness. If you allow the oven to get slack, the cake will be spoiled. Make an icing with the whites of 3 eggs, 24 teaspoonfuls of loaf sugar, and 8 drops of essence of lemon. When the cake is cool, mark it in small squares with a knife. Cover it with icing, and ornament it while wet, with nonpareils dropped on in borders, round each square of the cake. When the icing is dry, cut the cake in squares, cutting through the icing very carefully with a penknife. Or you may cut it in squares first, and then ice and ornament each square separately. French Almond Cake. 6 ounces of shelled sweet almonds. 3 ounces of shelled bitter almonds, or peach kernels. 3 ounces of sifted flour, dried near the fire. 14 eggs. 1 pound of powdered loaf sugar. 12 drops of essence of lemon. Blanch the almonds, by scalding them in hot water. Put them in a bowl of cold water, and wipe them dry, when you take them out. Pound them, one at a time, in a mortar, till they are perfectly smooth. Mix the sweet and bitter almonds together. Prepare them, if possible the day before the cake is made. Footnote: while pounding the almonds, pour in occasionally a little rose water. It makes them much lighter. Put the whites and yolks of the eggs, into separate pans. Beat the whites till they stand alone, and then the yolks till they are very thick. Put the sugar, gradually, to the yolks, beating it in very hard. Add, by degrees, the almonds, still beating very hard. Then put in the essence of lemon. Next, beat in, gradually, the whites of the eggs, continuing to beat for some time after they are all in. Lastly, stir in the flour, as slowly and lightly, as possible. Butter a large tin mold or pan. Put the cake in and bake it in a very quick oven, an hour or more according to its thickness. The oven must on no account be hotter at the top than at the bottom. When done, set it on a sieve to cool. Ice it, and ornament it with nonpareils. These almond cakes are generally baked in a turban-shaped mold, and the nonpareils put on, in spots or sprigs. A pound of almonds in the shells, if the shells are soft and thin, will generally yield half a pound when shelled. Hard, thick-shelled almonds, seldom yield much more than 1/4 of a pound, and should therefore never be bought for cakes or puddings. Bitter almonds and peach kernels can always be purchased with the shells off. Families should always save their peach kernels, as they can be used in cakes, puddings and custards. Macaroons. Half a pound of shelled sweet almonds. 1/4 of a pound of shelled bitter almonds. The whites of 3 eggs. 24 large teaspoonfuls of powdered loaf sugar. A teaspoonful of rose water. A large teaspoonful of mixed spice, nutmeg, mace and cinnamon. Blanch and pound your almonds, beat them very smooth, and mix the sweet and bitter together. Do them, if you can, the day before you make the macaroons. Pound and sift your spice. Beat the whites of 3 eggs till they stand alone, add to them, very gradually, the powdered sugar, a spoonful at a time, beat it in very hard, and put in, by degrees, the rose water and spice. Then stir in, gradually, the almonds. The mixture must be like a soft dough. If too thick, it will be heavy; if too thin, it will run out of shape. If you find your almonds not sufficient, prepare a few more, and stir them in. When it is all well mixed and stirred, put some flour in the palm of your hand, and taking up a lump of the mixture with a knife, roll it on your hand with the flour into a small round ball. Have ready an iron or tin pan, buttered, and lay the macaroons in it, as you make them up. Place them about 2 inches apart, in case of their spreading. Bake them about 8 or 10 minutes in a moderate oven. They should be baked of a pale brown color. If too much baked, they will lose their flavor; if too little, they will be heavy. They should rise high in the middle, and crack on the surface. You may, if you choose, put a larger proportion of spice. Footnote: coconut cakes may be made in a similar manner, substituting for the pounded almonds half a pound of finely grated coconut. They must be made into small round balls with a little flour laid on the palm of the hand, and baked a few minutes. They are very fine. Apes. A pound of flour, sifted. Half a pound of butter. Half a glass of wine, and a tablespoon of rosewater mixed. Half a pound of powdered white sugar. A nutmeg, grated. A teaspoonful of beaten cinnamon and mace. 3 tablespoonfuls of caraway seeds. Sift the flour into a broad pan, and cut up the butter in it. Add the caraways, sugar, and spice, and pour in the liquor by degrees, mixing it well with a knife. Add enough of cold water to make it a stiff dough. Spread some flour on your pasteboard, take out the dough, and knead it very well with your hands. Cut it into small pieces, and knead each separately, then put them all together, and knead the whole in one lump. Roll it out in a sheet about 1/4 of an inch thick. Cut it out in round cakes, with the edge of a tumbler, or a tin of that size. Butter an iron pan, and lay the cakes in it, not too close together. Bake them a few minutes in a moderate oven, till they are very slightly colored, but not brown. If too much baked, they will entirely lose their flavor. Do not roll them out too thin. Jumbles. 3 eggs. Half a pound of flour, sifted. Half a pound of butter. Half a pound of powdered loaf sugar. A tablespoonful of rosewater. A nutmeg grated. A teaspoonful of mixed mace and cinnamon. Stir the sugar and butter to a cream. Beat the eggs very light. Throw them, all at once, into the pan of flour. Put in, at once, the butter and sugar, and then add the spice and rosewater. If you have no rosewater, substitute 6 or 7 drops of strong essence of lemon, or more if the essence is weak. Stir the whole very hard, with a knife. Spread some flour on your pasteboard, and flour your hands well. Take up with your knife, a portion of the dough, and lay it on the board. Roll it lightly with your hands, into long shin rolls, which must be cut into equal lengths, curled up into rings, and laid gently into an iron or tin pan, buttered, not too close to each other, as they spread in baking. Bake them in a quick oven about 5 minutes, and grate loaf sugar over them when cool. Kisses. 1 pound of the best loaf sugar, powdered and sifted. The whites of 4 eggs. 12 drops of essence of lemon. A teacup of currant jelly. Beat the whites of 4 eggs till they stand alone. Then heat in, gradually, the sugar, a teaspoonful at a time. Add the essence of lemon, and beat the whole very hard. Lay a wet sheet of paper on the bottom of a square tin pan. Drop on it, at equal distances, a small teaspoonful of stiff currant jelly. Footnote: it is better to put a little of the beaten white of egg and sugar at first under the currant jelly. With a large spoon, pile some of the beaten white of egg and sugar, on each lump of jelly, so as to cover it entirely. Drop on the mixture as evenly as possible, so as to make the kisses of a round smooth shape. Set them in a cool open, and as soon as they are colored, they are done. Then take them out and place them 2 bottoms together. Lay them lightly on sieve, and dry them in a cool oven, till the 2 bottoms stick fast together, so as to form one ball or oval. Spanish buns. 4 eggs. 3/4 of a pound of flour, sifted. Half a pound of powdered white sugar. 2 wineglasses and a half of rich milk. 6 ounces of fresh butter. A wineglass and a half of the best yeast. A tablespoonful of rose water. A grated nutmeg. A large teaspoonful of powdered mace and cinnamon. Sift half a pound of flour into a broad pan, and sift a quarter of a pound, separately, into a deep plate, and set it aside. Put the milk into a soup plate, cut up the butter, and set it on the stove or near the fire to warm, but do not let it get too hot. When the butter is very soft, stir it all through the milk with a knife, and set it away to cool. Beat the eggs very light, and mix the milk and butter with them, all at once, then pour all into the pan of flour. Put in the spice, and the rose water, or if you prefer it, 8 drops of essence of lemon. Add the yeast, of which an increased quantity will be necessary, if it is not very strong and fresh. Stir the whole very hard, with a knife. Add the sugar gradually. If the sugar is not stirred in slowly, a little at a time, the buns will be heavy. Then, by degrees, sprinkle in the remaining quarter of a pound of flour. Stir all well together, butter a square iron pan, and put in the mixture. Cover it with a cloth, and set it near the fire to rise. It will probably not be light in less than 5 hours. When it is risen very high, and is covered with bubbles, bake it in a moderate oven, about a quarter of an hour or more in proportion to its thickness. When it is quite cool, cut it in squares, and grate loaf sugar over them. This quantity will make 12 or 15 buns. They are best the day they are baked. You may, if you choose, bake them separately, in small square tins, adding to the batter half a pound of currants or chopped raisins, well floured, and stirred in at the last. In making buns, stir the yeast well before you put it in, having first poured off the beer or thin part from the top. If your yeast is not good, do not attempt to make buns with it, as they will never be light. Buns may be made in a plainer way, with the following ingredients, mixed in the above manner. Half a pound of flour, sifted into a pan. A quarter of a pound of flour, sifted in a plate, and set aside to sprinkle in at the last. 3 eggs, well beaten. A quarter of a pound of powdered sugar. 3 wineglasses of milk. A wineglass and a half of the best yeast. A quarter of a pound of butter, cut up and warmed in the milk. Rusk. A quarter of a pound of powdered sugar. A quarter of a pound of fresh butter. 1 pound of flour sifted. 1 egg. 3 wineglasses of milk. A wineglass and a half of the best yeast. A tablespoonful of rose water. A teaspoonful of powdered cinnamon. Sift your flour into a pan. Cut up the butter and the milk, and warm them a little, so as to soften the butter, but not to melt it entirely. Beat your egg. Pour the milk and butter into your pan of flour, then the egg, then the rose water and spice, and lastly the yeast. Stir all well together with a knife. Spread some flour on your pasteboard, lay the dough on it, and knead it well. Then divide it into small pieces of an equal size, and knead each piece into a little thick round cake. Butter an iron pan, lay the cakes in it, and set them in a warm place to rise. Prick the tops with a fork. When they are quite light, bake them in a moderate oven. Indian Pound Cake. 8 eggs. 1 pint of powdered sugar. 1 pint of Indian meal, sifted, and half a pint of wheat flour. Half a pound of butter. 1 nutmeg, grated, and a teaspoonful of cinnamon. Half a glass of mixed wine and brandy. Stir the butter and sugar to a cream. Beat the eggs very light. Stir the meal and eggs, alternately, into the butter and sugar. Add the spice and liquor. Stir all well. Butter a tin pan, put in the mixture, and bake it in a moderate oven. This cake should be eaten while fresh. Cupcake. 5 eggs. 2 large teacups full of molasses. The same of brown sugar rolled fine. The same of fresh butter. 1 cup of rich milk. 5 cups of flour sifted. Half a cup of powdered allspice and cloves. Half a cup of ginger. Cut up the butter in the milk, and warm them slightly. Warm also the molasses, and stir it into the milk and butter, then stir in, gradually, the sugar, and set it away to get cool. Beat the eggs very light, and stir them into the mixture alternately with the flour. Add the ginger and other spice, and stir the whole very hard. Butter small tins, nearly fill them with the mixture, and bake the cakes in a moderate oven. Loaf cake. 2 pounds of sifted flour, setting aside half a pound to sprinkle in at the last. 1 pound of fresh butter. 1 pound of powdered sugar. 4 eggs. 1 pound of raisins, stoned, and cut in half. 1 pound of currants, washed and dried. Half a pint of milk. Half a glass of wine. Half a glass of brandy. A tablespoon of mixed spice, mace, nutmeg, and cinnamon. Half a pint of the best brewer's yeast. Or more, if the yeast is not very strong. Cut up the butter in the milk, and warm it till the butter is quite soft, then stir it together, and set it away to cool. It must not be made too warm. After you have beaten the eggs, mix them with the butter and milk, and stir the whole into the pan of flour. Add the spice and liquor, and stir in the sugar gradually. Having poured off the thin part from the top, stir the yeast, and pour it into the mixture. Then sprinkle in the remainder of the flour. Have ready the fruit, which must be well floured, stir it gradually into the mixture. Butter a large tin pan, and put the cake into it. Cover it, and set in a warm place for 5 or 6 hours to rise. When quite light, bake it in a moderate oven. Sugar biscuits. 3 pounds of flour, sifted. 1 pound of butter. 1.5 pounds of powdered sugar. Half a pint of milk. 2 tablespoonfuls of brandy. A small teaspoonful of pearl ash dissolved in water. 4 tablespoonfuls of caraway seeds. Cut the butter into the flour. Add the sugar and caraway seeds. Pour in the brandy, and then the milk. Lastly, put in the pearl ash. Stir all well with a knife, and mix it thoroughly, till it becomes a lump of dough. Flour your pasteboard, and lay the dough on it. Knead it very well. Divide it into 8 or 10 pieces, and knead each piece separately. Then put them all together, and knead them very well in one lump. Cut the dough in half, and roll it out into sheets, about half an inch thick. Beat the sheets of dough very hard, on both sides, with the rolling pin. Cut them out into round cakes with the edge of a tumbler. Butter iron pans, and lay the cakes in them. Bake them a very pale brown. If done too much, they will lose their taste. These cakes kept in a stone jar, closely covered from the air, will continue perfectly good for several months. Milk biscuits. 2 pounds of flour, sifted. Half a pound of butter. 2 eggs. 6 wine glasses of milk. 2 wine glasses of the best brewer's yeast, or 3. Of good homemade yeast. Cut the butter into the milk, and warm it slightly on the top of the stove, or near the fire. Sift the flour into a pan, and pour the milk and butter into it. Beat the eggs, and pour them in also. Lastly the yeast. Mix all well together with a knife. Flour your pasteboard, put the lump of dough on it, and knead it very hard. Then cut the dough in small pieces, and knead them into round balls. Stick the tops of them with a fork. Lay them in buttered pans and set them to rise. They will probably be light in an hour. When they are quite light, put them in a moderate oven and bake them. They are best when quite fresh. Butter biscuits. Half a pound of butter. 2 pounds of flour, sifted. Half a pint of milk, or cold water. A saltspoonful of salt. Cut up the butter in the flour, and put the salt to it. Wet it to a stiff dough with the milk or water. Mix it well with a knife. Throw some flour on the pasteboard, take the dough out of the pan, and knead it very well. Roll it out into a large thick sheet, and beat it very hard on both sides with the rolling pin. Beat it a long time. Cut it out with a tin, or cup, into small round thick cakes. Beat each cake on both sides, with the rolling pin. Prick them, with a fork. Put them in buttered pans, and bake them of a light brown in a slow oven. Gingerbread nuts. 2 pounds of flour, sifted. 1 pound of fresh butter. 1 quart of sugarhouse molasses. 2 ounces of ginger, or more, if it is not very strong. 12 dozen grains of allspice, powdered and sifted. 6 dozen cloves, powdered and sifted. Half an ounce of cinnamon, powdered and sifted. A half teaspoonful of pearl ash or saleratus, dissolved in a little vinegar. Cut up the butter in the flour, and mix it with the ginger and other spice. Wet the whole with the molasses, and stir all well together with a knife. Then add the dissolved pearl ash or saleratus. Throw some flour on your pasteboard, take the dough, a large handful at a time, and knead it in separate cakes. Then put all together, and knead it very hard for a long time, in one large lump. Cut the lump in half, roll it out in 2 even sheets, about half an inch thick, and cut it out in little cakes, with a very small tin, about the size of a cent. Lay them in buttered pans, and bake them in a moderate oven, taking care they do not scorch, as gingerbread is more liable to burn than any other cake. You may, if you choose, shape the gingerbread nuts, by putting flour in your hand. Taking a very small piece of the dough, and rolling it into a little round ball. Common gingerbread. A pint of molasses. 1 pound of fresh butter. 2 pounds and a half of flour, sifted. A pint of milk. A small teaspoonful of pearl ash, or less if it is strong. A teacup full of ginger. Cut the butter into the flour. Add the ginger. Having dissolved the pearl ash in a little vinegar, stir it with the milk and molasses alternately into the other ingredients. Stir it very hard for a long time, till it is quite light. Put some flour on your pasteboard, take out small portions of the dough, and make it with your hand into long rolls. Then curl up the rolls into round cakes, or twist 2 rolls together, or lay them in straight lengths or stick side by side, and touching each other. Put them carefully in buttered pans, and bake them in a moderate oven, not hot enough to burn them. If they should get scorched, scrape off with a knife, or grater, all the burnt parts, before you put the cakes away. You can, if you choose, cut out the dough with tins, in the shape of hearts, circles, ovals, and or you may bake it all in one, and cut it in squares when cold. If the mixture appears to be too thin, add, gradually, a little more sifted flour. Lafayette Gingerbread. 5 eggs. Half a pound of brown sugar. Half a pound of fresh butter. A pint of sugarhouse molasses. A pound and a half of flour. 4 tablespoonfuls of ginger. 2 large sticks of cinnamon, powdered and sifted. 3 dozen grains of allspice, powdered and sifted. 3 dozen of cloves, powdered and sifted. The juice and grated peel of 2 large lemons. A little pearl ash or saleratus. Stir the butter and sugar to a cream. Beat the eggs very well. Pour the molasses, at once, into the butter and sugar. Add the ginger and other spice, and stir all well together. Put in the egg and flour alternately, stirring all the time. Stir the whole very hard, and put in the lemon at the last. When the whole is mixed, stir it till very light. Butter an earthen pan, or a thick tin or iron one, and put the gingerbread in it. Bake it in a moderate oven, an hour or more, according to its thickness. Take care that it do not burn. Or you may bake it in small cakes, or little tins. Its lightness will be much improved by a small teaspoonful of pearl ash dissolved in a teaspoonful of vinegar, and stirred lightly in at the last. Footnote: if the pearl ash is strong, half a teaspoonful will be sufficient, or less even will do. It is better stir the pearl ash in, a little at a time, and you can tell by the taste of the mixture, when there is enough. Too much pearl ash will give it an unpleasant taste. If you use pearl ash, you must omit the lemon, as its taste will be entirely destroyed by the pearl ash. You may substitute for the lemon some raisins and currants, well floured to prevent their sinking. This is the finest of all gingerbread, but should not be kept long, as in a few days it becomes very hard and stale. A Dover cake. Half a pint of milk. A half teaspoonful of pearl ash, dissolved in a little vinegar. 1 pound of sifted flour. 1 pound of powdered white sugar. Half a pound of butter. 6 eggs. 1 glass of brandy. Half a glass of rose water. 1 grated nutmeg. A teaspoonful of powdered cinnamon. Dissolve the pearl ash in vinegar. Stir the sugar and butter to a cream, and add to it gradually the spice and liquor. Beat the eggs very light and stir them into the butter and sugar, alternately, with the flour. Add, gradually, the milk, and stir the whole very hard. Butter a large tin pan, and put in the mixture. Bake it 2 hours or more, in a moderate oven. If not thick, an hour or an hour and a half will be sufficient. Wrap it in a thick cloth, and keep it from the air, and it will continue moist and fresh for 2 weeks. The pearl ash will give it a dark color. It will be much improved by a pound of raisins, stoned and cut in half, and a pound of currants, well washed and dried. Flour the fruit well, and stir it in at the last. Crullers. Half a pound of butter. 3/4 of a pound of powdered white sugar. 6 eggs, or 7 if they are small. 2 pounds of flour, sifted. A grated nutmeg. A teaspoonful of powdered cinnamon. A tablespoonful of rose water. Cut the butter into the flour, add the sugar and spice, and mix them well together. Beat the eggs and pour them into the pan of flour, and add the rose water, and mix the whole into a dough. If the eggs and rose water are not found sufficient to wet it, add a very little cold water. Mix the dough very well with a knife. Spread some flour on your pasteboard, take the dough out of the pan, and knead it very well. Cut it into small pieces, and knead each separately. Put all the pieces together, and knead the whole in one lump. Roll it out into a large square sheet, about half an inch thick. Take a jagging iron, or, if you have not one, a sharp knife. Run it along the sheet, and cut the dough into long narrow slips. Twist them up in various forms. Have ready an iron pan with melted lard. Lay the crullers lightly in it, and fry them of a light brown, turning them with a knife and fork, so as not to break them, and taking care that both sides are equally done. When sufficiently fried, spread them on a large dish to cool, and grate loaf sugar over them. Crullers may be made in a plainer way, with the best brown sugar, rolled very fine, and without spice or rose water. They can be fried, or rather boiled, in a deep iron pot. They should be done in a large quantity of lard, and taken out with a skimmer that has holes in it, and held on the skimmer till the lard drains from them. If for family use, they can be made an inch thick. Doughnuts. 3 pounds of sifted flour. A pound of powdered sugar. 3/4 of a pound of butter. 4 eggs. Half a large teacup full of best brewer's yeast. A pint and a half of milk. A teaspoonful of powdered cinnamon. A grated nutmeg. A tablespoonful of rose water. Cut up the butter in the flour. Add the sugar, spice, and rose water. Beat the eggs very light, and pour them into the mixture. Add the yeast, half a teacup or 2 wineglasses full, and then stir in the milk by degrees, so as to make it a soft dough. Cover it, and set it to rise. When quite light, cut it in diamonds with a jagging iron or a sharp knife, and fry them in lard. Grate loaf sugar over them when done. Waffles. 6 eggs. A pint of milk. 1/4 of a pound of butter. 1/4 of a pound of powdered white sugar. 1.5 pounds of flour, sifted. A teaspoonful of powdered cinnamon. Warm the milk slightly. Cut up the butter in it and stir it a little. Beat the eggs well, and pour them into the butter and milk. Sprinkle in half the flour, gradually. Stir in the sugar, by degrees, and add the spice. Stir in, gradually, the remainder of the flour, so that it becomes a thick batter. Heat your waffle iron, then grease it well, and pour in some of the butter. Shut the iron tight, and bake the waffle on both sides, by turning the iron. As the waffles are baked, spread them out separately on a clean napkin. When enough are done for a plateful, lay them on a plate in 2 piles, buttering them, and sprinkling each with beaten cinnamon. Soft muffins. 5 eggs. A quart of milk. 2 ounces of butter. A teaspoonful of salt. 2 large tablespoonfuls of brewer's yeast or 4 made of homemade yeast. Enough of sifted flour to make a stiff batter. Warm the milk and butter together, and add to them the salt. Beat the eggs very light and stir them into the milk and butter. Then stir in the yeast, and lastly, sufficient flour to make a thick batter. Cover the mixture, and set it to rise, in a warm place, about 3 hours. When it is quite light, grease your baking iron, and your muffin rings. Set the rings on the iron, and pour the batter into them. Bake them a light brown. When you split them to put on the butter, do not cut them with a knife, but pull them open with your hands. Cutting them while hot will make them heavy. Indian batter cakes. A quart of sifted Indian meal. A handful of wheat flour sifted. Mixed. 3 eggs, well beaten. 2 tablespoonfuls of fresh brewer's yeast, or 4 of homemade yeast. A teaspoonful of salt. A quart of milk. Make the milk quite warm, and then put into it the yeast and salt, stirring them well. Beat the eggs, and stir them into the mixture. Then, gradually stir in the flour and Indian meal. Cover the batter, and set it to rise 4 or 5 hours. Or if the weather is cold, and you want the cakes for breakfast, you may mix the batter late the night before. Should you find it sour in the morning, dissolve a small teaspoonful of pearl ash in as much water as will cover it, and stir it into the batter, letting it set afterwards at least half an hour. This will take off the acid. Grease your baking iron, and pour on it a ladleful of the batter. When brown on one side, turn the cake on the other. Footnote: Indian batter cakes may be made in a plain and expeditious way, by putting 3 pints of cold water or cold milk into a pan. And gradually sifting into it, stirring all the time, a quart of Indian meal mixed with half a pint of wheat flour, and a small spoonful of salt. Stir it very hard, and it may be baked immediately, as it is not necessary to set it to rise. Flannel cakes or crumpets. 2 pounds of flour, sifted. 4 eggs. 3 tablespoonfuls of the best brewer's yeast, or 4 Na. Half of homemade yeast. A pint of milk. Mix a teaspoonful of salt with the flour, and set the pan before the fire. Then warm the milk, and stir into it the flour so as to make a stiff batter. Beat the eggs very light, and stir them into the yeast. Add the eggs and yeast to the batter, and beat all well together. If it is too stiff, add a little more warm milk. Cover the pan closely and set it to rise near the fire. Bake it, when quite light. Have your baking iron hot. Grease it, and pour on a ladleful of batter. Let it bake slowly, and when done on one side, turn it on the other. Butter the cakes, cut them across, and send them to table hot. Rolls. 3 pints of flour, sifted. 2 teaspoonfuls of salt. 4 tablespoonfuls of the best brewer's yeast, or 6 of homemade yeast. Half a pint more of warm water, and a little more flour to mix in. Before the kneading, mix the salt with the flour, and make a deep hole in the middle. Stir the warm water into the yeast, and pour it into the hole in the flour. Stir it with a spoon just enough to make a thin batter, and sprinkle some flour over the top. Cover the pan, and set it in a warm place for several hours. When it is light, add half a pint more of lukewarm water, and make it with a little more flour, into a dough. Knead it very well for 10 minutes. Then divide it into small pieces, and knead each separately. Make them into round cakes or rolls. Cover them, and set them to rise about an hour and a half. Bake them, and when done, let them remain in the oven, without the lid, for about 10 minutes. Part the third, Sweetmeats. General directions. In preparing sugar for sweetmeats, let it be entirely dissolved, before you put it on the fire. If you dissolve it in water, allow about half a pint of water to a pound of sugar. If you boil the sugar before you add the fruit to it, it will be improved in clearness by passing it through a flannel bag. Skim off the brown scum all the time it is boiling. If sweetmeats are boiled too long, they lose their flavor and become of a dark color. If boiled too short a time, they will not keep well. You may ascertain when jelly is done, by dropping a small spoonful into a glass of water. If it spreads and mixes with the water, it requires more boiling. If it sticks in a lump to the bottom, it is sufficiently done. This trial must be made after the jelly is cold. Raspberry jelly requires more boiling than any other sort. Black currant jelly less. Apple jelly. Take the best pippin, or bellflower apples. No others will make good jelly. Pare, core, and quarter them. Lay them in a preserving kettle, and put to them as much water only, as will cover them, and as much lemon peel as you choose. Boil them till they are soft, but not till they break. Drain off the water through a colander, and mash the apples with the hack of a spoon. Put them into a jelly bag, set a deep dish or pan under it, and squeeze out the juice. To every pint of juice, allow a pound of loaf sugar, broken up, and the juice of 2 lemons. Put the apple juice, the sugar, and the lemon juice into the preserving kettle. Boil it 20 minutes, skimming it well. Take it immediately from the kettle, and pour it warm into your glasses, but not so hot as to break them. When cold, cover each glass with white paper dipped in brandy, and tie it down tight with another paper. Keep them in a cool place. Quince jelly is made in the same manner, but do not pare the quinces. Quarter them only. Red currant jelly. Wash your currants, drain them, and pick them from the stalks. Mash them with the back of a spoon. Put them in a jelly bag, and squeeze it till all the juice is pressed out. To every pint of juice, allow a pound of the best loaf sugar. Put the juice and the sugar into your kettle, and boil them 20 minutes, skimming all the while. Pour it warm into your glasses, and when cold, tie it up with brandy paper. Jellies should never be allowed to get cold in the kettle. If boiled too long, they will lose their flavor, and become of a dark color. Strawberry, raspberry, blackberry, and grape jelly may be made in the same manner, and with the same proportion of loaf sugar. Red currant jelly may also be made in a very simple manner, by putting the currants whole into the kettle, with the sugar, allowing a pound of sugar to a pound of currants. Boil them together 20 minutes, skimming carefully. Then pour them into a sieve, with a pan under it. Let them drain through the sieve into the pan, pressing them down with the back of a spoon. Take the jelly, while warm, out of the pan, and put it into your glasses. Tie it up with brandy paper when cold. Black currant jelly. Pick the currants from the stalks, wash and drain them. Mash them soft with a spoon, put them in a bag, and squeeze out the juice. To each pint of juice, allow 3/4 of a pound of loaf sugar, put the juice and sugar into a preserving kettle, and boil them about 10 minutes, skimming them well. Take it immediately out of the kettle. Put it warm into your glasses. Tie it up with brandy paper. The juice of black currants is so very thick, that it requires less sugar and less boiling than any other jelly. Gooseberry jelly. Cut the gooseberries in half, they must be green, and put them in a jar closely covered. Set the jar in an oven, or pot filled with boiling water. Keep the water boiling round the jar till the gooseberries are soft, take them out, mash them with a spoon, and put them into a jelly bag to drain. When all the juice is squeezed out, measure it, and to a pint of juice, allow a pound of loaf sugar. Put the juice and sugar into the preserving kettle, and boil them 20 minutes, skimming carefully. Put the jelly warm into your glasses. Tie them up with brandy paper. Cranberry jelly is made in the same manner. Grape jelly. Pick the grapes from the stems, wash and drain them. Mash them with a spoon. Put them in the preserving kettle, and cover them closely with a large plate. Boil them 10 minutes. Then pour them into your jelly bag, and squeeze out the juice. Allow a pint of juice to a pound of sugar. Put the sugar and juice into your kettle, and boil them 20 minutes, skimming them well. Fill your glasses while the jelly is warm, and tie them up with brandy papers. Peach jelly. Wipe the wool off your peaches, which should be free stones and not too ripe, and cut them in quarters, crack the stones, and break the kernels small. Put the peaches and the kernels into a covered jar, set them in boiling water, and let them boil till they are soft. Strain them through a jelly bag, till all the juice is squeezed out. Allow a pound of loaf sugar to a pint of juice. Put the sugar and juice into a preserving kettle, and boil them 20 minutes, skimming carefully. Put the jelly warm into your glasses, and when cold, tie them up with brandy paper. Plum and green gage jelly may be made in the same manner, with the kernels, which greatly improve the flavor. Preserved quinces. Pare and core your quinces, carefully taking out the parts that are knotty and defective. Cut them into quarters, or into round slices. Put them into a preserving kettle and cover them with the parings and a very little water. Lay a large plate over them to keep in the steam, and boil them till they are tender. Take out the quinces, and strain the liquor through a bag. To every pint of liquor, allow a pound of loaf sugar. Boil the juice and sugar together, about 10 minutes, skimming it well. Then put in the quinces, and boil them gently 20 minutes. When the sugar seems to have completely penetrated them, take them out, put them in a glass jar, and pour the juice over them warm. Tie them up, when cold, with brandy paper. In preserving fruit that is boiled first without the sugar, it is generally better, after the first boiling, to let it stand till next day before you put the sugar to it. Preserved pippins. Pare and core some of the largest and finest pippins. Put them in your preserving kettle. Footnote: the use of brass or bell-metal kettles is now most entirely superseded by the enameled kettles of iron lined with china, called preserving kettles. Brass and bell-metal having always been objectionable on account of the verdigris which collects in them, with some lemon peel, and all the apple parings. Add a very little water, and cover them closely. Boil them till they are tender, taking care they do not burn. Take out the apples, and spread them on a large dish to cool. Pour the liquor into a bag, and strain it well. Put it into your kettle with a pound of loaf sugar to each pint of juice, and add lemon juice to your taste. Boil it 5 minutes, skimming it well. Then put in the whole apples, and boil them slowly half an hour, or till they are quite soft and clear. Put them with the juice, into your jars, and when quite cold, tie them up with brandy paper. Preserved apples are only intended for present use, as they will not keep long. Pears may be done in the same way, either whole or cut in half. They may be flavored either with lemon or cinnamon, or both. The pears for preserving should be green. Preserved peaches. Take the largest and finest freestone peaches, before they are too ripe. Pare them, and cut them in halves or in quarters. Crack the stones, and take out the kernels, and break them in pieces. Put the peaches, with the parings and kernels, into your preserving kettle, with a very little water. Boil them till they are tender. Take out the peaches and spread them on a large dish to cool. Strain the liquor through a bag or sieve. Next day, measure the juice, and to each pint allow a pound of loaf sugar. Put the juice and sugar into the kettle with the peaches, and boil them slowly half an hour, or till they are quite soft, skimming all the time. Take the peaches out, put them into your jars, and pour the warm liquor over them. When cold, tie them up with brandy paper. If boiled too long, they will look dull, and be of a dark color. Footnote: to preserve peaches whole, pare them and thrust out the stones with a skewer. Then proceed as above, only blanch the kernels and keep them whole. When the peaches are done, stick a kernel into the hole of every peach, before you put them into the jars. Large fruit will keep best in broad shallow stone pots. If you do not wish the juice to be very thick, do not put it on to boil with the sugar, but first boil the sugar alone, with only as much water as will dissolve it, and skim it well. Let the sugar, in all cases, be entirely melted before it goes on the fire. Having boiled the sugar and water, and skimmed it to a clear syrup, then put in your juice and fruit together, and boil them till completely penetrated with the sugar. Preserved crab apples. Wash your fruit. Cover the bottom of your preserving kettle with grape leaves. Put in the apples. Hang them over the fire, with a very little water, and cover them closely. Do not allow them to boil, but let them simmer gently till they are yellow. Take them out, and spread them on a large dish to cool. Pare and core them. Put them again into the kettle, with fresh vine leaves under and over them, and a very little water. Hang them over the fire till they are green. Do not let them boil. Take them out, weigh them, and allow a pound of loaf sugar to a pound of crab apples. Put to the sugar just water enough to dissolve it. When it is all melted, put it on the fire, and boil and skim it. Then put in your fruit, and boil the apples till they are quite clear and soft. Put them in jars, and pour the warm liquor over them. When cold, tie them up with brandy paper. Preserved plums. Cut your plums in half, they must not be quite ripe, and take the stones. Weigh the plums and allow a pound of loaf sugar to a pound of fruit. Crack the stones, take out the kernels and break them in pieces. Boil the plums and kernels very slowly for about 15 minutes, in as little water as possible. Then spread them on a large dish to cool, and strain the liquor. Next day make your syrup. Melt the sugar in as little water as will suffice to dissolve it, about half a pint of water to a pound of sugar, and boil it a few minutes, skimming it till quite clear. Then put in your plums with the liquor, and boil them 15 minutes. Put them in jars, pour the juice over them warm, and tie them up, when cold, with brandy paper. Footnote: plums for common use, are very good done in molasses. Put your plums into an earthen vessel that holds a gallon, having first slit each plum with a knife. To 3 quarts of plums put a pint of molasses. Cover them and set them on hot coals in the chimney corner. Let them stew for 12 hours or more, occasionally stirring them, and renewing the coals. Next day put them up in jars. Done in this manner they will keep till the next spring. Syrups may be improved in clearness, by adding to the dissolved sugar and water, some white of egg very well beaten, allowing the white of 1 egg to each pound of sugar. Boil it very hard, and skim it well, that it may be quite clear before you put in your fruit. Preserved strawberries. Weigh the strawberries after you have picked off the stems. To each pound of fruit allow a pound of loaf sugar, which must be powdered. Strew half of the sugar over the strawberries, and let them stand in a cold place 2 or 3 hours. Then put them in a preserving kettle over a slow fire, and by degrees strew on the rest of the sugar. Boil them 15 or 20 minutes, and skim them well. Put them in wide-mouthed bottles, and when cold, seal the corks. If you wish to do them whole, take them carefully out of the syrup, one at a time, while boiling. Spread them to cool on large dishes, not letting the strawberries touch each other, and when cool, return them to the syrup, and boil them a little longer. Repeat this several times. Keep the bottles in dry sand, in a place that is cool and not damp. Gooseberries, currants, raspberries, cherries and grapes may be done in the same manner. The stones must be taken from the cherries, which should be morellas, or the largest and best red cherries winky face, and the seeds should be extracted from the grapes with the sharp point of a penknife. Gooseberries, grapes, and cherries, require longer boiling than strawberries, raspberries, or currants. Preserved cranberries. Wash your cranberries, weigh them, and to each pound allow a pound of loaf sugar. Dissolve the sugar in a very little water, about half a pint of water to a pound of sugar, and set it on the fire in a preserving kettle. Boil it nearly 10 minutes, skimming it well. Then put in your cranberries, and boil them slowly, till they are quite soft, and of a fine color. Put them warm into your jars or glasses, and tie them up with brandy paper, when cold. All sorts of sweetmeats keep better in glasses, than in stone of earthen jars. When opened for use, they should be tied up again immediately, as exposure to the air spoils them. Common glass tumblers are very convenient for jellies, and preserved small fruit. White jars are better than stone or earthen, for large fruit. Preserved pumpkin. Cut slices from a fine high-colored pumpkin, and cut the slices into chips about the thickness of $1. The chips should be of an equal size, 6 inches in length and an inch broad. Weigh them and allow to each pound of pumpkin chips, a pound of loaf sugar. Have ready a sufficient number of fine lemons, pare off the yellow rind, and lay it aside. Cut the lemons in half, and squeeze the juice into a bowl. Allow a gill of juice to each pound of pumpkin. Put the pumpkin into a broad pan, laying the sugar among it. Pour the lemon juice over it, cover the pan, and let the pumpkin chips, sugar and lemon juice, set all night. Early in the morning put the whole into a preserving pan, and boil all together, skimming it well, till the pumpkin becomes clear and crisp, but not till it breaks. It should have the appearance of lemon candy. You may, if you choose, put some lemon peel with it, cut in very small pieces. Half an hour's boiling, or a little more, is generally sufficient. When it is done, take out the pumpkin, spread it on a large dish, and strain the syrup through a bag. Put the pumpkin into your jars or glasses, pour the syrup over it, and tie it up with brandy paper. If properly done, this is a very fine sweetmeat. The taste of the pumpkin will be lost in that of the lemon and sugar, and the syrup is particularly pleasant. It is eaten without cream, like preserved ginger. It may be laid on puff paste shells, after they are baked. Preserved pineapple. Pare your pineapples, and cut them in thick slices. Weigh the slices and to each pound allow a pound of loaf sugar. Dissolve the sugar in a very small quantity of water, stir it, and set it over the fire in a preserving kettle. Boil it 10 minutes, skimming it well. Then put in it the pineapple slices, and boil them till they are clear and soft, but not till they break. About half an hour, or perhaps less time, will suffice. Let them cool in a large dish or pan, before you put them into your jars, which you must do carefully, lest they break. Pour the syrup over them. Tie them up with brandy paper. Raspberry jam. Allow a pound of sugar to a pound of fruit. Mash the raspberries and put them with the sugar into your preserving kettle. Boil it slowly for an hour, skimming it well. Tie it up with brandy paper. All jams are made in the same manner. Appendix, miscellaneous receipts. A la mode beef. A pound of fresh beef weighing from 18 to 20 pounds. A pound of the fat of bacon or corned pork. The marrow from the bone of the beef, / chopped together. A quarter of a pound of beef suet, / 2 bundles of pot herbs, parsley, thyme, small onions, and chopped fine. 2 large bunches of sweet marjoram / sufficient when powdered to make. 2 bunches of sweet basil, / make 4 tablespoonfuls of each. 2 large nutmegs, / half an ounce of cloves, beaten to a powder. Half an ounce of mace, / 1 tablespoonful of salt. 1 tablespoonful of pepper. 2 glasses of Madeira wine. If your a la mode beef is to be eaten cold, prepare it 3 days before it is wanted. Take out the bone. Fasten up the opening with skewers, and tie the meat all round with tape. Rub it all over on both sides with salt. A large round of beef will be more tender than a small one. Chop the marrow and sew it together. Pound the spice. Chop the pot herbs very fine. Pick the sweet marjoram and sweet basil clean from the stalks, and rub the leaves to a powder. You must have at least 4 tablespoonfuls of each. Add the pepper and salt, and mix well together all the ingredients that compose the seasoning. Cut the fat of the bacon or pork into pieces about 1/4 inch thick and 2 inches long. With a sharp knife make deep incisions all over the round of beef and very near each other. Put first a little of the seasoning into each hole, then a slip of the bacon pressed down hard and covered with more seasoning. Pour a little wine into each hole. When you have thus stuffed the upper side of the beef, turn it over and stuff in the same manner the underside. If the round is very large, you will require a larger quantity of seasoning. Put it in a deep baking dish, pour over it some wine, cover it, and let it set till next morning. It will be much the better for lying all night in the seasoning. Next day put a little water in the dish, set it in a covered oven, and bake or stew it gently for 12 hours at least, or more if it is a large round. It will be much improved by stewing it in lard. Let it remain all night in the oven. If it is to be eaten hot at dinner, put it in to stew the evening before, and let it cook till dinner time next day. Stir some wine and a beaten egg into the gravy. If brought to table cold, cover it all over with green parsley, and stick a large bunch of something green in the center. What is left will make an excellent hash the next day. Chicken pudding. Cut up a pair of young chickens, and season them with pepper and salt and a little mace and nutmeg. Put them into a pot with 2 large spoonfuls of butter, and water enough to cover them. Stew them gently. And when about half cooked, take them out and set them away to cool. Pour off the gravy, and reserve it to be served up separately. In the meantime, make a batter as if for a pudding, of 8 tablespoonfuls of sifted flour stirred gradually into a quart of milk, 6 eggs well beaten and added by degrees to the mixture, and a very little salt. Put a layer of chicken in the bottom of a deep dish, and pour over it some of the batter, then another layer of chicken, and then some more batter, and so on till the dish is full, having a cover of batter at the top. Bake it till it is brown. Then break an egg into the gravy which you have set away, give it a boil, and send it to table in a sauce boat to eat with the pudding. A boned turkey. A large turkey. 3 sixpenny loaves of stale bread. 1 pound of fresh butter. 4 eggs. 1 bunch of pot herbs, parsley, thyme, and little onions. 2 bunches of sweet marjoram. 2 bunches of sweet basil. 2 nutmegs. Half an ounce of cloves. Pounded fine. 1/4 ounce of mace. A tablespoonful of salt. A tablespoonful of pepper. Skewers, tape, needle, and coarse thread will be wanted. Grate the bread, and put the crusts in water to soften. Then break them up small into the pan of crumbled bread. Cut up a pound of butter in the pan of bread. Rub the herbs to powder, and have 2 tablespoonfuls of sweet marjoram and 2 of sweet basil, or more of each if the turkey is very large. Chop the pot herbs, and pound the spice. Then add the salt and pepper, and mix all the ingredients well together. Beat slightly 4 eggs, and mix them with the seasoning and bread crumbs. After the turkey is drawn, take a sharp knife and, beginning at the wings, carefully separate the flesh from the bone, scraping it down as you go, and avoid tearing or breaking the skin. Next, loosen the flesh from the breast and back, and then from the thighs. It requires great care and patience to do it nicely. When all the flesh is thus loosened, take the turkey by the neck, give it a pull, and the skeleton will come out entire from the flesh, as easily as you draw your hand out of a glove. The flesh will then be a shapeless mass. With a needle and thread mend or sew up any holes that may be found in the skin. Take up a handful of the seasoning, squeeze it hard and proceed to stuff the turkey with it, beginning at the wings, next to the body, and then the thighs. If you stuff it properly, it will again assume its natural shape. Stuff it very hard. When all the stuffing is in, sew up the breast and skewer the turkey into its proper form, so that it will look as if it had not been boned. Tie it round with tape and bake it 3 hours or more. Make a gravy of the giblets chopped, and enrich it with some wine and an egg. If the turkey is to be eaten cold, drop spoonfuls of red currant jelly all over it, and in the dish round it. A large fowl may be boned and stuffed in the same manner. Collared pork. A leg of fresh pork, not large. 2 tablespoonfuls of powdered sage. 2 tablespoonfuls of sweet marjoram, / powdered. 1 tablespoonful of sweet basil, / 1/4 ounce of mace, / half an ounce of cloves, powdered. 2 nutmegs, / a bunch of pot herbs, chopped small. A 6-penny loaf of stale bread, grated. Half a pound of butter, cut into the bread. 2 eggs. A tablespoonful of salt. A tablespoonful of black pepper. Grate the bread, and having softened the crust in water, mix it with the crumbs. Prepare all the other ingredients, and mix them well with the grated bread and egg. Take the bone out of a leg of pork, and rub the meat well on both sides with salt. Spread the seasoning thick all over the meat. Then roll it up very tightly and tie it round with tape. Put it into a deep dish with a little water, and bake it 2 hours. If eaten hot, put an egg and some wine into the gravy. When cold, cut it down into round slices. Spiced oysters. 200 large fresh oysters. 4 tablespoonfuls of strong vinegar. A nutmeg, grated. 3 dozen of cloves, whole. 8 blades of mace, whole. 2 teaspoonfuls of salt if the oysters are fresh. 2 teaspoonfuls of whole allspice. As much cayenne pepper as will lie on the point of a knife. Put the oysters, with their liquor, into a large earthen pitcher. Add to them the vinegar and all the other ingredients. Stir all well together. Set them in the stove, or over a slow fire, keeping them covered. Take them off the fire several times, and stir them to the bottom. As soon as they boil completely they are sufficiently done. If they boil too long they will be hard. Pour them directly out of the pitcher into a pan, and set them away to cool. They must not be eaten till quite cold, or indeed till next day. If you wish to keep them a week, put a smaller quantity of spice, or they will taste too much of it by setting so long. Let them be well covered. Oysters in the shell may be kept all winter by laying them in a heap in the cellar, with the concave side upwards to hold in the liquor. Sprinkle them every day with strong salt and water, and then with Indian meal. Cover them with matting or an old carpet. Stewed oysters. Open the oysters and strain the liquor. Put to the liquor some grated stale bread, and a little pepper and nutmeg, adding a glass of white wine. Boil the liquor with these ingredients, and then pour it scalding hot over the dish of raw oysters. This will cook them sufficiently. Have ready some slices of buttered toast with the crust cut off. When the oysters are done, dip the toast in the liquor, and lay the pieces round the sides and in the bottom of a deep dish. Pour the oysters and liquor upon the toast, and send them to table hot. Oyster soup. 3 pints of large fresh oysters. 2 tablespoonfuls of butter, rolled in flour. A bunch of sweet herbs. A saucer full of chopped celery. A quart of rich milk. Pepper to your taste. Take the liquor of 3 pints of oysters. Strain it, and set it on the fire. Put into it, pepper to your taste, 2 tablespoonfuls of butter rolled in flour, and a bunch of sweet marjoram and other pot herbs, with a saucer full of chopped celery. When it boils, add a quart of rich milk and as soon as it boils again, take out the herbs, and put in the oysters just before you send it to table. Boiling them in the soup will shrivel them and destroy their taste. Fried oysters. For frying, choose the largest and finest oysters. Beat some yolks of eggs and mix with them grated bread, and a small quantity of beaten nutmeg and mace and a little salt. Having stirred this batter well, dip your oysters into it, and fry them in lard, till they are of a light brown color. Take care not to do them too much. Serve them up hot. For grated bread, some substitute crackers pounded to a powder, and mixed with yolk of egg and spice. Baked or scalloped oysters. Grate a small loaf of stale bread. Butter a deep dish well, and cover the sides and bottom with bread crumbs. Put in half the oysters with a little mace and pepper. Cover them with crumbs and small bits of butter strewed over them. Then put in the remainder of the oysters. Season them. Cover them as before with crumbs and butter. If the oysters are fresh, pour in a little of the liquor. If they are salt, substitute a little water. Bake them a very short time. You may cook them in the small scalloped dishes made for the purpose. Oyster patties. Make some rich puff paste, and bake it in very small tin patty pans. When cool, turn them out upon a large dish. Stew some large fresh oysters with a few cloves, a little mace and nutmeg, some yolk of egg boiled hard and grated, a little butter, and as much of the oyster liquor as will cover them. When they have stewed a little while, take them out of the pan, and set them away to cool. When quite cold, lay 2 or 3 oysters in each shell of puff paste. Oyster sauce. When your oysters are opened, take care of all the liquor, and give them 1 boil in it. Then take the oysters out, and put to the liquor 3 or 4 blades of mace. Add to it some melted butter, and some thick cream or rich milk. Put in your oysters and give them a boil. As soon as they come to a boil, take them of the fire. Pickled oysters. 400 large fresh oysters. A pint of vinegar. 8 spoonfuls of salt. A pint of white wine. 6 tablespoonfuls of whole black pepper. 8 blades of mace. Strain the liquor of the oysters and boil it. Then pour it hot over the oysters, and let them lie in it about 10 minutes. Then take them out, and cover them. Boil the liquor with the salt, pepper, mace, vinegar, and wine. When cold, put the oysters in a close jar, and pour the liquor over them. Cover the jar very tight, and the oysters will keep a long time. If the oysters are salt, put no salt to the liquor. Chicken salad. 2 large cold fowls, either boiled or roasted. The yolks of 9 hard-boiled eggs. Half a pint of sweet oil. Half a pint of vinegar. A gill of mixed mustard. A small teaspoonful of cayenne pepper. A small teaspoonful of salt. 2 large heads, or 4 small ones, of fine celery. Cut the meat of the fowls from the bones, in pieces not exceeding an inch in size. Cut the white part of the celery into pieces about an inch long. Mix the chicken and celery well together. Cover them and set them away. With the back of a wooden spoon, mash the yolks of eggs till they are a perfectly smooth paste. Mix them with the oil, vinegar, mustard, cayenne, and salt. Stir them for a long time, till they are thoroughly mixed and quite smooth. The longer they are stirred the better. When this dressing is sufficiently mixed, cover it, and set it away. 5 minutes before the salad is to be eaten, pour the dressing over the chicken and celery, and mix all well together. If the dressing is put on long before it is wanted, the salad will be tough and hard. This salad is very excellent made of cold turkey instead of chicken. Lobster salad. Take 2 large boiled lobsters. Extract all the meat from the shell, and cut it up into very small pieces. For lobster salad, you must have lettuce instead of celery. Cut up the lettuce as small as possible. Make a dressing as for a chicken salad, with the yolks of 9 hard-boiled eggs, half a pint of sweet oil, half a pint of vinegar, a gill of mustard, a teaspoonful of cayenne, and a teaspoonful of salt. Mix all well together with a wooden spoon. A few minutes before it is to be eaten, pour the dressing over the lobster and lettuce and mix it very well. Stewed mushrooms. Take a quart of fresh mushrooms. Peel them and cut off the stems. Season them with pepper and salt. Put them in a saucepan or skillet, with a lump of fresh butter the size of an egg, and sufficient cream or rich milk to cover them. Put on the lid of the pan, and stew the mushrooms about a quarter of an hour, keeping them well covered or the flavor will evaporate. When you take them off the fire, have ready 1 or 2 beaten eggs. Stir the eggs gradually into the stew, and send it to table in a covered dish. Peach Cordial. Take a peck of clingstone peaches, such as come late in the season, and are very juicy. Pare them, and cut them from the stones. Crack about half the stones and save the kernels. Leave the remainder of the stones whole, and mix them with the cut peaches, add also the kernels. Put the whole into a wide-mouthed demijohn, and pour on them 2 gallons of double rectified whiskey. Add 3 pounds of rock sugar candy. Cork it tightly, and set it away for 3 months, then bottle it, and it will be fit for use. This cordial is as clear as water, and nearly equal to noyau. Cherry Bounce. Take a peck of morella cherries, and a peck of black hearts. Stone the morellas and crack the stones. Put all the cherries and the cracked stones into a demijohn, with 3 pounds of loaf sugar slightly pounded or beaten. Pour in 2 gallons of double rectified whiskey. Cork the demijohn, and in 6 months the cherry bounce will be fit to pour off and bottle for use, but the older it is, the better. Raspberry Cordial. To each quart of raspberries allow a pound of loaf sugar. Mash the raspberries and strew the sugar over them, having first pounded it slightly, or cracked it with the rolling pin. Let the raspberries and sugar set till next day, keeping them well covered, then put them in a thin linen bag and squeeze out the juice with your hands. To every pint of juice allow a quart of double rectified whiskey. Cork it well, and set it away for use. It will be ready in a few days. Raspberry vinegar, which, mixed with water, is a pleasant and cooling beverage in warm weather, is made exactly in the same manner as the cordial, only substituting the best white vinegar for the whiskey. Blackberry Cordial. Take the ripest blackberries. Mash them, put them in a linen bag and squeeze out the juice. To every quart of juice allow a pound of beaten loaf sugar. Put the sugar into a large preserving kettle, and pour the juice on it. When it is all melted, set it on the fire, and boil it to a thin jelly. When cold, to every quart of juice allow a quart of brandy. Stir them well together, and bottle it for use. It will be ready at once. Ginger Beer. Put into a kettle, 2 ounces of powdered ginger, or more if it is not very strong, half an ounce of cream of tartar, 2 large lemons cut in slices, 2 pounds of broken loaf sugar, and 1 gallon of soft water. Simmer them over a slow fire for half an hour. When the liquor is nearly cold, stir into it a large tablespoonful of the best yeast. After it has fermented, bottle for use. Jelly Cake. Stir together till very light, half a pound of fresh butter and half a pound of powdered white sugar. Beat 12 eggs very light and stir them into the butter and sugar, alternately with a pound of sifted flour. Add a beaten nutmeg, and half a wineglass of rosewater. Have ready a flat circular plate of tin, which must be laid on your griddle, or in the oven of your stove, and well greased with butter. Pour on it a large ladle full of the batter, and bake it as you would a buckwheat cake, taking care to have it of a good shape. It will not require turning. Bake as many of these cakes as you want, laying each on a separate plate. Then spread jelly or marmalade all over the top of each cake, and lay another upon it. Spread that also with jelly, and so on till you have a pile of 5 or 6, looking like one large thick cake. Trim the edge nicely with a penknife, and cover the top with powdered sugar. Or you may ice it, putting on the nonpareils or sugar sand in such a manner as to mark out the cake in triangular divisions. When it is to be eaten, cut it in 3-cornered slices as you would a pie. Coloring for icing, etc. To make a red coloring for icing. Take 20 grains of cochineal powder, 20 grains of cream of tartar, and 20 grains of powdered alum. Put them into gill of cold soft water, and boil it very slowly till reduced to 1/2. Strain it through thin muslin, and cork it up for use. A very small quantity of this mixture will color icing of a beautiful pink. With pink icing, white nonpareils should be used. Rice cakes for breakfast. Put half a pound of rice in soak overnight. Early in the morning boil it very soft, drain it from the water, mix with it a quarter of a pound of butter, and set it away to cool. When it is cold, stir it into a quart of milk, and add a very little salt. Beat 6 eggs, and sift half a pint of flour. Stir the egg and flour alternately into the rice and milk. Having beaten the whole very well, bake it on the griddle in cakes about the size of a small dessert plate. Butter them, and send them to table hot. Ground rice pudding. Take 5 tablespoonfuls of ground rice and boil it in a quart of new milk, with a grated nutmeg or a teaspoonful of powdered cinnamon, stirring it all the time. When it has boiled, pour it into a pan and stir in a quarter of a pound of butter, and a quarter of a pound of powdered sugar, a nutmeg and half a pint of cream. Set it away to get cold. Then heat 8 eggs, omitting the whites of 4. Have ready a pound of dried currants well cleaned, and sprinkled with flour, stir them into the mixture alternately with the beaten egg. Add half a glass of rose water, or half a glass of mixed wine and brandy. Butter a deep dish, put in the mixture, and bake it of a pale brown. Or you may bake it in saucers. Tomata ketchup. Slice the tomatas. Put them in layers into a deep earthen pan, and sprinkle every layer with salt. Let them stand in this state for 12 hours. Then put them over the fire in a preserving kettle, and simmer them till they are quite soft. Pour them into a linen bag, and squeeze the juice from them. Season the liquor to your taste, with grated horseradish, a little garlic, some mace, and a few cloves. Boil it well with these ingredients, and, when cold, bottle it for use. Yeast. Have ready 2 quarts of boiling water, put into it a large handful of hops, and let them boil 20 minutes. Sift into a pan a pound and a half of flour. Strain the liquor from the hops, and pour half of it over the flour. Let the other half of the liquid stand till it is cool, and then pour it gradually into the pan of flour, mixing it well. Stir into it a large teacup full of good yeast, brewer's yeast if you can get it. Put it immediately into bottles, and cork it tightly. It will be fit for use in an hour. It will be much improved and keep longer, by putting into each bottle a teaspoonful of pearl ash.